Chapter 2400. Dao San and Dao Air weren't very satisfied with the new dinner. However, it was already very sumptuous for Katie. In the end, Katie sat in front of Dao Air and Dao San. She ate in big mouthfuls. Compared to the meticulously prepared food, the dinner in the detention center was indeed like dog shit. Who are they? Magicians from the East, Scott Lee said casually. Katie rolled his eyes. Even though Dao San had read his fortune before, he still felt that it might be a coincidence, or that Dao San had played some trick. What about you? I'm a translator, they called. I'm an amateur. Are they very rich? I don't know. What did they do to get in here? They were ordered to bring their junior back to the country. Their junior didn't want to, so they used their connections to temporarily lock them up here. Katie couldn't help but frown. He was a police officer after all. Hearing Scott Lee's words, he couldn't help but think that the police system was corrupt in framing two innocent old men. Katie was considering if he should find a chance to ask Ronson to let the two old men out. How much longer? Ronson asked. Not long. We can penetrate this safe as long as we assemble it. The melting point of titanium alloy isn't high. The cutting temperature of the laser far exceeds the melting point of titanium alloy, the worker said. All their work was actually to assemble the laser cutter. They had been busy since 3 in the afternoon until now. Almost all of their time was spent assembling. Fortunately, after a few hours, and the hard work of a dozen workers, the assembly of the laser cutter was nearing completion. We can't penetrate it directly. I want to cut it from the side, Ronson said. They still didn't know what was hidden in the titanium alloy safe. However, if they pierced it directly from the front, it could easily destroy the things inside. Although it was possible to cut it from the side, the danger could be reduced. Okay, we can start cutting. The laser cutter was aimed at the side of the safe. Level 2 laser ready. The person in charge handed Ronson a pair of sunglasses to protect his eyes. Put this on. Otherwise you might go blind. It's best to stand back. There might be scattering when we use the laser. A green laser shot out from a circular aperture. The green laser hit the outer wall of the safe and immediately bounced off. However, there were baffles beside the safes to prevent damage or injuries from the laser reflection. The laser also left a spot on the titanium alloy safe. The surrounding titanium alloy also showed signs of melting. Increase the output. Current power level is 278. Continue to increase the power. Just then, Ronson heard a puff. A black hole was left on the outer wall of the safe. Cut it open? Yes, cut it open. Ronson nodded. At this moment, the black hole on the safe suddenly emitted a large amount of gas. What's this smell? It's really choking, cough cough. The operator hadn't even taken a step when he suddenly fell to the ground. Then the gas began to spread outwards, and the surrounding workers collapsed one after another. Ronson's expression changed dramatically. Could it be that the safe contained poisonous gas? But at that moment, the gas seemed to be controlled again. It began to shrink crazily. Ronson rubbed his eyes and looked at the gas in shock. The gas was behaving very strangely. It was changing in an unimaginable way. Finally, the gas turned into a woman in classic clothes. The woman looked left and right. Then her gaze fell on Lang Sr. Where is this? This isn't the agreed place. The woman looked at Ronson and said, You're not my contact. Where's the delivery man? Where is he now? Stop, don't move. Put your hands on your head. Ronson pulled out his gun and pointed at the strange woman. What's that? A weapon? The woman looked at Ronson and asked, I'm a LAPD officer. I want you to put your hands on your head and get on the ground. Now. Immediately. No one can order me, the woman said calmly. Bang, Ronson fired. The woman only tilted her shoulder slightly. Her shoulder was pierced by a bullet, but it didn't bleed. The wound was also quickly healing. This thing means nothing to me. It doesn't have any magic support. Ronson had never seen anything like this. A woman who was completely unafraid of guns and bullets. Maybe she wasn't human at all. All right, mortal. I want to know where the delivery man is. Ronson's expression changed. The delivery man she mentioned was definitely Katie, but Ronson wouldn't betray Katie. This time, Ronson aimed the gun at the woman's head. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots in a row. The woman's head tilted back slightly, but her body didn't fall. The woman slowly straightened herself and looked at Ronson. The woman's strange and terrifying reaction sent chills down Ronson's spine. At that moment, the woman raised one hand and grabbed something in the air. A red spear appeared in her hand. But the woman thought about it. Seems like I'm overreacting. Then, the woman pulled back the red spear. Ronson's breathing became ragged. At first he didn't feel it. But the more he faced this woman, the more he felt a suffocating pressure. But if you continue to refuse my request, I will kill every human that appears in my sight. The woman looked at the unconscious people on the ground. Let's start with them. Ronson panicked. The unconscious people around him were all normal people. They weren't even police officers. And because of his own needs, he brought them here. But now he had to drag them down. Ronson felt guilty. At that moment, he was faced with a multiple-choice question. Sacrifice the lives of these normal people, or sacrifice Katie's life. Ronson had been using Katie, but the more he did so, the more he felt guilty towards Katie. I can sense that there are many humans here. It shouldn't be hard to kill them all, the woman said calmly. I will take you there. Ronson finally gave in. He still had some hope that this woman wouldn't harm Katie. Wise choice. Who exactly are you? Don't you already have the answer? I'm not human. What is your goal? Goal? Do you think I will tell you? You call me a mortal, so you must think of yourself as a god. As a god, would you be afraid of telling a mortal your plan? This kind of provocation doesn't work on me. Chapter 2401. Ronson brought the woman into the cell. Hey Ronson, who's this woman? She's so pretty. Did she commit a crime too? Lock her in my room. I'll teach her a lesson. Ronson listened to the filthy words of the prisoners in the cells along the way. He was afraid that the woman behind him would go berserk and kill all the prisoners. However, the woman followed behind Ronson expressionlessly. Ronson heaved a long sigh of relief. Are you afraid that I'll kill them? They're just criminals. Most of them deserve to die. Their lives aren't up to you to decide. No, I have the ability and the right to punish them. You can't stop me. Ronson didn't say anything else and silently walked in front. However, he still tried to slow down. I don't like to waste time, the woman said. Suddenly, the woman stopped and took a few steps back. What are you doing? He's not here. Ronson's eyes flickered and he was a little panicked. However, the woman ignored Ronson's shouts and looked at Katie in the cell next to him. Katie, is the woman outside here to see you? Scully patted Katie. Katie looked at the woman outside and shook her head. I don't know her. At that moment, the woman outside smiled. You don't know me, but I know you, delivery man. Hearing this, Katie raised an eyebrow. Who are you? I'm the living thing you want to deliver. The woman said, you had to fulfill your vow and send me to my destination, but you broke your promise. Katie looked at Ronson and asked him what was going on with her eyes. Ronson's expression was ugly, and he kept shaking his head. At that moment, a red spear appeared in the woman's hand. Oh no. Scully's expression changed and he formed a hand seal. Ha! In an instant, the iron bars in front of them twisted and locked onto the woman. Both Katie and Ronson were shocked by Scully's move. The woman was instantly wrapped up by the iron bars. Ronson didn't care what was going on, and his face was filled with joy. He was worried that something would happen to Katie. He didn't expect such a mysterious expert to be with him. But before he could rejoice, a giggle came from beside him. The iron bars around the woman were being forced open by her. Close it. Scott Lee tried his best to control the fence. However, this woman was simply too strong. His control was completely incomparable to this woman's. Finally, the woman tore off the iron bars covering her body. The red spear in the woman's hand suddenly slammed towards Scott Lee. Suddenly, a long sword blocked the woman's red spear. Huh. Both Katie and Langsun looked surprised again. It was Dao Air who blocked the red spear with his sword. The woman's strength abruptly increased by a few notches. She lowered the long sword in her hand to dissipate the force. At the same time, she twisted the hilt of the sword in her hand, and the tip of the sword stabbed toward the woman at a tricky angle. The woman immediately took a few steps back. Dao Air also took a few steps back. What's going on with this woman? Dao San asked. I can't see through her life providence. That's because she's not human. Of course you can't tell, Dao Er said. Not human? What was that? Demon? Goblin? Or is it some kind of ghost? I can't tell. Dao Er shook his head. This is too strange. What is this woman? What? Mortal, you're being too rude, the woman said unhappily. I'm a god. God? No, you're not a god. Dao Er shook his head. He had followed Zhang Tianyi down the mountain many times, so he was very knowledgeable. However, he could not tell what this woman was for now. She was definitely not a god. Humph. Golden flames suddenly erupted from the woman's body. Lang Sun, who was beside her, was forced back by the golden flames. The spear in the woman's hand burst into golden flames. Her target was Katie. Katie was so frightened that she stood rooted to the ground when she saw the golden flames. At that moment, Dao Er took out an 8 trigrams mirror and placed it in front of Katie. He shouted, "Reflect." The golden flames were instantly reflected back to the woman. However, the woman was not afraid of his attack. A very good magical tool. You mortals can only rely on tricks like this to survive. Even if I don't use this artifact, I can still suppress you. As soon as Dao Er finished speaking, the 8 trigrams mirror in his hand suddenly disappeared. Senior brother, why did you put away the 8 trigrams mirror? I didn't. However, the woman did not give them any time to hesitate. She suddenly stabbed the red spear in her hand at Dao Er. Damn it. Dao San suddenly threw out dozens of talismans. The woman immediately changed her attack pattern and swung the red spear to knock the talismans away. However, the talismans were like nimble birds, cleverly avoiding the woman's spear and sticking to the woman's body one after another. Once the talismans were stuck to the woman's body, she would immediately lose her bodily functions. Soon, the woman's body was covered in talismans. Masters, you're the best. You finally subdued this woman, Scott Lee exclaimed in surprise. Katie's mouth was also wide open, her face filled with disbelief. Eastern magic casters. Are you really Eastern magic casters? Lang Sun heaved a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, these 2 old China men were here. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. However, Dao Er and Dao San did not look too good. This is only temporary. We'd better change places. What? Why? Dao Er and Dao San did not explain, because there was no need for them to. They had already discovered that the talismans on the woman's body were being ignited one by one. Soon, the woman would regain her freedom. Master, get rid of her while she can't move, Scott Lee shouted anxiously. Dao Er shook his head. These talismans are called invulnerable talismans. They can subdue enemies but not hurt them. To hurt someone, you have to break the talismans first. We've used so many talismans and only managed to trap her for a moment. She's not to be underestimated. Then what should we do? What should we do? Of course we should find an empty place to fight. What else do you think? Boom! At that moment, Dao San had already destroyed the wall opposite them, revealing a huge hole. Leave from here. Is this considered a prison break? Lang Sun asked hesitantly. Katie rolled her eyes. Or should we stay here and wait for death? In the end, they left through the hole. A few minutes later, the talismans on the woman burned away, and she regained her freedom. Chapter 2402. Hi Chen, are you asleep? David called Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao rubbed his eyes and then pinched his forehead. Yes. If there's nothing else, I wish you a good night. What if there's something? David asked. If it's drinking, you can wait until tomorrow. I never wake you up in the middle of the night to drink. Okay, so you're in trouble? Or Kate? It's not me or Kate. It's LAPD, David said. Of course, it's my trouble too. Oh, I remember you're the deputy chief of LAPD now, right? I forgot to congratulate you. I'm not here to ask for a blessing. I'll give you a present too. I'm not asking for a present either. Then what do you want? Can you come to the police station? Did you accept some evil organization's blackmail and set up a trap in the police station? Then the moment I step in, you'll blow me up along with the police station? That's not funny at all. Okay, I'll go now. Chen Zhao knew that David wouldn't call him at this time if it wasn't something important. After arriving at the police station, Chen Zhao asked along the way and found David in the surveillance room. Hey David, you're here alone. Are you watching something that's not suitable for children? David turned around and glanced at Chen Zhao. It's indeed inappropriate. Come take a look. So exciting. Intrigued, Chen Zhao sat beside David. He'd been looking forward to what kind of exciting scenes David would show him. In the end, David played a battle between spiritualists. Isn't there anything more exciting? I'm a bit disappointed. Chen Zhao pursed his lips. But where did you get the video? It happened in the detention center an hour ago, David said. No one else saw it, right? Chen Zhao asked, frowning. I rushed here immediately and forbade anyone else from coming in. As he spoke, David pressed the delete button and erased the recording completely. I don't know where that woman came from, but she kidnapped my subordinate, Ronson, and forced him to bring her into the detention center. Then, she attacked one of the cells that held 4 prisoners, but the people in that cell didn't seem to be ordinary people. Then, there was a conflict between the 2 sides, and the woman was controlled. Then, the 4 prisoners and Ronson escaped through the hole that was blasted open. Their current whereabouts are unknown. What do you want me to do? Capture all of them? Or secretly execute him? I don't care about the others, but Ronson is my subordinate. I must ensure his safety. Okay, which direction did they run to? I don't know. Aren't you a spiritualist? Wouldn't you know once you do a divination? Chen Zhao rolled his eyes. I'm not a prophet, nor do I know astrology. Anyway, this is what you're good at. You definitely have a way. Chen Zhao rubbed his forehead. Okay, I'll think of something. I'll go to the detention center and see if I can find any clues. David accompanied Chen Zhao to the detention center. All the prisoners had already been transferred. It was empty now. Chen Zhao arrived at the scene. The iron bars of the cell were completely deformed and broken. One of the spiritualists should have the ability to control metal. Isn't he like Magneto in the movies? Similar ability, but definitely not as strong. Because the surveillance footage was from the 2 sides of the corridor, Chen Zhao didn't see the battle in the cell. Right now there was still a trace of magic in the cell. Just then, Chen Zhao saw a corner of yellow paper on the ground. Chen Zhao picked up the yellow paper and studied it carefully. It should be the talisman paper that the Chinese Taoists used. Chinese Taoists? Dragon Tiger Mountain? Give me a file on the people locked here. Take it. Cheniba Lu Haisheng. Chen Zhao looked at their files. They were both from Yingtan City, Jiangxi Province, Huaxia. Dragon Tiger Mountain's Celestial Masters sect was in Jiangxi. Were these 2 from Dragon Tiger Mountain's Celestial Masters sect? How is it? Any clues? Yes. Do you need my help? Are you going to be my burden? Are you serious? David stomped his feet in anger. Okay, I'll go out and take a look. I'll contact you if I find anything. Chen Zhao walked out of the hole. It led to the underground parking lot. Unfortunately, there weren't any surveillance cameras here. Chen Zhao picked up his phone and called Yanghua. Yanghua, do you know Cheniba and Lu Haisheng? What? Chen Zhao, what did you do to my 2 seniors? If I tell you that they're in my hands now, what will you do? What do you want? Yanghua asked angrily. Okay, I'm just kidding, but something really happened to your 2 seniors, Chen Zhao said. Not long ago, someone attacked LAPD. I have a friend who works there, so I was called over to help. But now your 2 seniors are missing. Are you serious? You're not kidding? Okay, I'm kidding. Bye. As soon as Chen Zhao hung up, Yanghua called back immediately. Chen Zhao, say it clearly. You don't believe me, right? What else do you want me to say? You're saying that my 2 senior brothers are missing? Do you have a way to find them? Where are you now? LAPD's underground parking lot. I'm coming now. Yanghua was very worried now. He called Dao 2 and Dao 3, but no one answered. He believed most of it. Moreover, he was the one who sent them to the police station. If something happened to them, he would feel guilty for the rest of his life. Yanghua hurried to the LAPD's underground parking lot. Chen Zhao was indeed here. Chen Zhao, what's going on? That's it. I told you everything I know on the phone. Our Dragon Tiger Mountain Celestial Masters sect has a special sensing spell. We can determine each other's location. Then what are you waiting for? Hurry and sense where your two seniors are, or which direction they're in. They're purposely hiding their location. I can't sense them. So you don't have any ideas? Not completely, but it's best to have something they've used before. That way, I can use the reliance spell to find them. Will this work? Chen Zhao took out the corner of the small yellow talisman. Yes, there's Dao 3's aura on it. It's a bit weak, but it can still be used. Then use this to find them. Let's begin. 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 2403. Dao Air, Dao San, Lang Sun, Katie, and Scott Lee were squeezed into a small car. Where are we going? Everyone looked at Dao Air and Dao San. We've only been in Los Angeles for less than 24 hours. And you're asking me where to go? Dao Air said angrily. Find an empty place with no one around. At this moment Kathy, who was driving, saw the pursuers behind her. The woman was flying behind them, and she was getting closer and closer to them. Katie stepped on the accelerator and sped on the road at full speed. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake that woman off. That woman is catching up. Taishang Laojun, this is an urgent order. As fast as lightning, Dao Sen quickly made a hand seal and stuck the talisman on the steering wheel. Wudat suddenly, the car they were in let out a sound like a sports car. The entire car reached a speed of 300 kilometers per hour in an instant. I remember turning right into the coastal road. There's a coastline there. Go there, Scott Lee said. Kathy immediately turned the steering wheel, but the woman was still in hot pursuit. That woman's strength is really strong, and her speed is also very fast. This won't be easy, Dao Air said. He was a little apprehensive. The strength that woman had displayed was not to be underestimated. Not long after, a vast coastline appeared in front of everyone. What a beautiful coast. Fighting on such a beautiful beach is not a bad choice. Let's go down from here. Kati didn't even step on the brakes. Instead, she drove the car straight onto the steep slope outside the highway. Finally, it crashed heavily into the sand. Everyone fell out of the car. Dao San and Dao Air were still fine. Although they were not at ease, they were not in a sorry state either. At this moment, the woman caught up with them and looked down at them. Aren't you going to continue running? Dao Air and Dao San looked at each other and made a hand seal at the same time. Boundless heaven and earth, borrow the power of the universe. Once it is drawn back, there will be no survival. At this moment, the two of them were suddenly covered in a layer of green and red gas. 2 tall and mighty Dharma idols emerged from the green and red mist. Shentu, you lay. The others quickly backed away in fright, even though Dao San and Dao Air were on their side. However, the 2 Dharma idols in front of him were still very shocking. Shentu and Yulei were guardian spirits, and they also had deity positions in Taoism. It was widespread among the people, and there were some who faintly gathered spirits to become gods. Dao Air controlled the Shentu Dharma idol to wield a pair of scissors in one hand and a hammer in the other. He waved his arms, and the power of wind and thunder was instantly boosted as he struck the woman. The woman's face darkened. She could also see that these 2 Dharma powers were not ordinary. Not daring to be careless, he immediately took out his red spear to face the enemy. Golden flames burst out from the tip of the red spear. Bang! The 2 forces collided, but no one gained the upper hand. At that moment Yulei, who was controlled by Dao San, also attacked. Yulei held 2 swords in his hands and imbued them with the power of water and fire. He shot them at the woman at the same time. The woman's expression was cold as she blocked the attack with her golden flames again. The 3 of them exchanged a few moves, but it was a draw. However, Dao Air and Dao San's cultivation base and magic power were profound, so they had the upper hand. You mortals are still so shameless, used to bullying the few with numbers. How can a demon from the outer realm know that my Dao is natural? Even if we fight one-on-one, you might not necessarily win. Senior brother, I can't move. At that moment, Dao San's body seemed to have been hit by a spell. Not only could he not move his body, but the Yulei Dharma body he had summoned also disappeared. Yulei and Shentu were originally of the same origin, so they complemented each other. If there was only one of them, their strength would be greatly reduced. Oh no, it's the spirit of speech. This woman can use the spirit of speech. Dao Er's expression changed drastically. The woman couldn't help but reveal a proud expression. She then said with a hint of pride, "Spirit of words? This is not a low-level spirit of speech, it's a law." Dao Er and Dao San looked at each other. Dao Er shook his head. "With your strength, you can't control the laws. Although I don't know how you did it, you definitely can't control the laws." What was a law? To a spiritualist, the laws were like the laws of a normal person's society. Even his own grandmaster, who had an exceedingly high cultivation base, had not grasped the laws of nature. Although the woman in front of them was powerful, she was many times weaker than their grandmaster. Therefore, they did not believe that this woman could control the laws. "You don't believe me? Then let me show you the true power of the laws." The woman snorted coldly. She looked at Dao Er and Dao San and shouted, "Dispel the spell." Instantly, the Shentu Dharma body that Dao Er had summoned was cancelled. How was this possible? Dao Er and Dao San's expressions changed drastically again. The woman did not give them time to react. Golden flames surged towards them. The two hurriedly dodged. But at this moment the woman said again, "Hit." Boom boom. With two shocking explosions, Dao Er and Dao San fell to the ground in a sorry state. Their clothes, hair, eyebrows, and beards were all burnt to a crisp. Just as the two were about to cast healing spells, they heard the woman shout, "Healing seal." The two's healing spells were immediately interrupted. This made the two of them waver. This woman might not have the strength to crush them. However, her law-like power left them with nowhere to use it. "Let's fight her." The two of them roared in exasperation. Dao Er tore off his Taoist robe, revealing his skinny upper body. Dao San, on the other hand, struck a strange pose. The two of them prepared themselves. "Mana interruption," the woman shouted again. In an instant, Dao Er and Dao San spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. They were prepared to fight with their lives on the line. They were already accumulating their qi. But they did not expect this woman to directly interrupt their qi and magic power. Unable to continue, they immediately suffered from the backlash. "What's the situation now, Scully? Those two old Chinamen seem to be losing." Scully's expression was extremely solemn. That woman was really too strong. No, to be more precise, it was strange. Her ability was too strange. She had forcefully turned the tide of defeat into victory. As for Dao Er and Dao San, although their cultivation and magic power were powerful, however, it was useless against that woman. "We can't use qi-breaking spells. This woman's ability is too strange. If she really is using law, then what does her law contain? I can't tell. If we can't break her ability, we will most likely lose." This woman was indeed very strong, but she had not reached the point where she could crush Dao Er and Dao San. Just like before, Dao Er and Dao San could summon Yulei and Shintu to gain the upper hand. However, this woman's ability directly broke their spells. They could not figure out whether this woman was using law or not. Of course, even if it was, they would not be able to tell, because they had never seen an opponent who used law. Therefore, they could not tell. Chapter 2404. Senior brother, what do we do now? Dao Er held his breath and looked at the troublesome woman in front of him. "Looks like we have no choice but to use our trump card." Dao San was shocked when he heard Dao Er's words. The woman sensed the changes in Dao Er and Dao San. Dao Er suddenly took out a talisman. "Talisman seal," the woman immediately ordered. However, Dao Er's lips curled into a smile. The talisman suddenly turned into a golden hollow ball. "Go!" The golden hollow ball tore through the air and grew larger after flying for a while. By the time it reached the woman, it had already become a giant ball with a diameter of more than 10 meters. The woman pointed her red spear at the giant ball, but it did not touch the body. The spear passed through the giant ball. Then, a huge suction force came and sucked the woman into the giant ball. In the next instant, the giant ball shrank rapidly. Dao San pressed his palms against the ground. Golden red patterns spread out from Dao San's palms. These golden red patterns crawled up the hollow ball like living creatures. In the blink of an eye, they covered the entire outside of the hollow ball. Universal 8 Desolation, Tao of Nature suppress. Dao San shouted. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. In the next moment, his magic power paused again, and the hollow ball suddenly exploded. The woman regained her freedom. Her face was filled with rage. These two old Taoist priests were too much of a threat to her. Their endless methods brought her great danger every time. If she had not used the same trick again and sealed Dao San's magic power, he would not have been able to use his techniques. She might have really been suppressed by Dao San. The woman's eyes flashed with a fierce glint. At this moment, the woman's body began to twist, and the golden flames on her body became more intense. Senior brother, what is that woman doing? She's not doing anything good. The woman's body twisted and suddenly split into a clone. Upon closer inspection, it was not a clone, but another woman. Her figure, appearance, and temperament were completely different. However, this woman's aura was no weaker than the first woman's. Damn, it can't be. I can't even handle one, and now another. However, this was not the end result. The two women began to split again, and two became four. The four women's strength was almost the same. Dao Er and Dao San looked at each other. Junior brother, bring out your trump card. All right, senior brother. The two of them shouted in unison. Boundless heaven and earth, borrow the power of Qian Kuan, run. Run. The four women, as well as Scott Lee and the others, were all stunned. Be it the enemies or the allies, no one could react in time. At this moment, Dao Er and Dao San raised a gust of wind. Scott Lee, Katie, and Ronson were swept up by the gale and swept towards the sea. The four women were angry and angry. Even when they were running away, they still had to make such a big scene. When they heard Dao Er and Dao San's shouts, they thought that they really had some trump card up their sleeves, but it turned out that they were running away. However, the four women did not intend to let them go, and immediately chased after them. 5 elements escape art, water escape, 1,000-mile rapids. Dao Er shouted, and the 5 of them immediately dived into the sea. Aside from Scott Lee, Katie and Ronson were still in shock. They had never come into contact with supernatural incidents before. At this moment, inconceivable things kept happening. He wasn't wearing any equipment, but he could breathe freely in the sea. Moreover, he was moving faster than any marine vehicle. The 4 women were still following him closely above the sea, although they did not enter the water. As long as they did not lose them, everything they had done before would be for naught. Dao Er looked up and exchanged a glance with Dao San. Dao San made a hand seal underwater. In an instant, 4 clones of Dao San suddenly appeared around them. These 4 clones all carried Dao San's aura. Under Dao San's command, these clones immediately scattered and fled in different directions. Split up and chase after them, the first woman ordered. Yes, the 4 women immediately chased in 4 different directions. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the sea directly below them, Dao Er secretly poked his head out and glanced at the sea. Phew! We've finally lost them. What kind of tricks does this woman have? She's too difficult to deal with. Her methods are strange and unpredictable. Let's not talk so much and float to the surface first. My water escape art can't last for too long. The group floated to the surface. At this moment, most of their magic power had already been used up. For cultivators like them, their essence, chi, and spirit were different from ordinary people. However, essence, chi, and spirit were all maintained by magic power. Once they used up too much of their magic power, their energy and stamina would also be greatly reduced. Shaoli, is there any way to send us to the nearest land? We're out of energy, Dao San said with a pale face. The 2 of them had first fought and suffered heavy injuries. In addition, they had forcefully used magic power and spells after a few backlashes. At this moment, it was difficult for them to maintain their previous state. Yes, please wait for a moment, masters. Watch me. While speaking, Scott Lee spread his arms and used his ability. Something in the sea seemed to be gathering towards them. Soon, everyone knew what was going on. Scott Lee used his ability to gather the trace amounts of metal elements in the sea and the bottom of the sea to form a small iron boat. However, at this moment, a sudden voice came from above them. Is this the coffin you chose? Everyone looked up and saw a figure appear out of thin air. It was that woman. Everyone's expression changed drastically. Not bad at tricking everyone, but I also know this trick. The woman looked down at them from above. At this moment, Dao Er and Dao San's faces were withered. They were already exhausted and had no strength left to fight. Scott Lee was even weaker. He didn't have much strength to begin with. Just now, he had used up most of his magic power to create this small iron boat, so he couldn't fight anymore. Cough cough. Looks like we're going to die here soon. Very good, at least you've learned to give up. The woman held a red spear in her hand. Golden flames were brewing. Suddenly, the surface of the sea in the distance exploded. Following that, a black liquid shot out from the sea towards the woman. The woman immediately turned her spear around. The golden flames collided with the black liquid and cancelled each other out. Everyone looked over and saw a small island rising from the surface of the sea. No, it wasn't a small island, but the head of some creature. The head was slowly rising from the surface of the sea. It was the head of a giant snake. However, this giant snake's head was different from normal snakes. It had a pair of fins on both sides of its head. Sea monster. That was everyone's first thought. Chapter 2405. The snake monster opened its bloody mouth and spat out a jet of black venom. The woman immediately retaliated. The red spear in her hand emitted a blinding golden light. The black venom could not block the golden light at all, and struck the snake's head. Whoosh! The snake's head was blasted to pieces by the golden light. The snake's neck sank into the sea without its head. Just when everyone thought that this was an interlude that had come and gone quickly, a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. An unprecedented giant wave was rising in front of them. Everyone's mouths were agape. Half the sky was already covered by the giant wave. The woman's expression changed drastically. Her body twisted and split into 16 clones. Each of the 16 women held a red spear and pointed it at the giant wave that was as tall as a skyscraper. 16 beams of red light shot into the center of the giant wave and exploded into 16 balls of fire. At the same time, the wave's momentum was stopped. The towering wave instantly collapsed like a skyscraper. But at that moment, a terrifying giant mouth opened up from the sea without any warning and bit at the 16 women from below. Oh no! Not all of the 16 women reacted in time. They were not real clones. Each of them had their own consciousness. Therefore, it was impossible for them to discover the attack from below at the same time. The giant mouth swallowed 8 women who could not dodge in time. Everyone watched as a terrifying beast rushed out of the sea and swallowed half of the enemies. This was an indescribable shock. Return my sisters to me. The first woman was enraged. In an instant 10, 20, 100, 1,000 women appeared in the sky. Everyone's eyes widened, and their faces were filled with shock. Dao Er and Dao San finally understood that the woman had not used her true strength during the battle. No, perhaps the first woman's strength was just that. But she could create clones, or rather, summon more companions who were equally powerful. I understand now. I finally understand. She's not using laws. She's using the spirit of speech, Dao Er exclaimed. Spirit of speech? How can the spirit of speech affect us directly? Perhaps one person's spirit of speech can't do it. But what about 100? 1,000? Dao San looked thoughtfully at the golden flames that filled the sky. At this moment, those women were like golden flowers blooming in the night sky. All the women were attacking the surface of the sea in a frenzy. Beams of golden light pierced through the seawater and attacked the 2 giant beasts that were swimming in the sea. Little Nine, run. That woman has gone mad. Amon and Little Nine were frantically dodging the attacks from above. However, the 2 of them were huge, so it was inevitable that they would take a few hits. Although those few blows wouldn't be able to kill them, however, they might not be able to hide forever. Therefore, they had already begun to beat the drums of retreat. Show yourself. Show yourself. Show yourself. All the women were shouting in unison. In an instant, the surface of the sea was torn apart. Before Amon and Little Nine could escape, they were directly exposed in front of these enraged women. Me. I swear in the name of the Valkyrie, you must die. The first woman coldly stared at Amon and Little Nine. Little Nine was still alright. Although it had 9 heads, it still had the body of a snake. But Amon was different. He was in the form of a whale. At this moment, he was flopping on the sea mud, unable to move at all. Valkyrie? The Valkyrie in Norse mythology? Scottley exclaimed in surprise. They are Valkyrie. In Norse mythology, the legend of Valkyrie had always existed as the maids of Odin. Of course, the purpose of their existence was not to serve Odin tea and water. They had a high status in Norse mythology. They selected loyal and brave warriors for Odin. And after those loyal and brave warriors died, they guided the unyielding souls into the Valhalla and became immortal spirits. These women are Valkyrie. Dodo 2 and Dodo 3 of course knew about the Valkyrie in mythology, but they didn't expect that they really existed in reality. And the woman from before called herself a god. Now that they thought about it, if they thought about it carefully, they were indeed gods. Kateri's expression was completely frozen. The goods she was transporting were Valkyrie? Unclean creatures, your final verdict is destruction. You have no right to judge my pet. A sudden voice came. Everyone looked over and saw a man walking over on the sea. As the man walked over, the sea that had been torn apart by the Valkyrie closed up again. The man clearly wasn't an ordinary person, but they felt that it was useless for anyone to come now. They were also impressed. Didn't he know the current situation? He actually dared to get involved in this mess. They're your pets. Obviously. Chen Zhao shrugged. Then you deserve to die too. The Valkyrie looked at him coldly. Chen Zhao scratched his ear. Be more direct and do something. You can't kill me with just words. The Valkyrie's red spear suddenly shot a golden flame at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao lifted his finger. A pillar of water rose from the sea and charged toward the golden flame. Boom! The golden flame and seawater canceled each other out, creating a beautiful flower of water and fire. The golden flame was more intense and ferocious, but the seawater was endless. Looks like you chose the wrong battlefield, Chen Zhao said proudly. This is my territory. Really? The Valkyrie sneered and waved her hand lightly. Instantly, all the Valkyries in the sky pointed their weapons at Chen Zhao at the same time. Countless golden beams shot toward Chen Zhao. Dao 2 and Dao 3's expressions changed. He's dead. That guy is dead for sure. To them, even their grandmaster would have to run away with his tail between his legs, let alone Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao spread his arms and spread them upward. Countless water pillars rose from the sea and shot toward the golden beam. Everyone was dumbfounded. Beautiful, Katie murmured to herself. That miraculous scene made everyone's eyeballs almost pop out of their sockets. However, on the other hand, the Valkyries were infuriated. Chen Zhao's calmness was even more intolerable. Do you think this is your main battlefield? Isn't it obvious? Chen Zhao said proudly. Then let's change the battlefield. The Valkyrie said coldly. In an instant, everyone felt their vision blur. And then they appeared in a huge desert. Little Nine and Amon also landed on the sand. Chapter 2406. At first they could still struggle in the mud, but now they couldn't. Especially Amon, he was in a miserable state. The Valkyrie looked down at Chen Zhao. How's the new battlefield I prepared for you? Everyone else's faces turned extremely ugly. They could all tell that Chen Zhao could fight against the Valkyrie, with his geographical advantage on the sea. But now, the Valkyrie had completely taken away Chen Zhao's geographical advantage through her words. She'd turned the sea battlefield into another extreme, a desert with absolutely no water. The same thought popped up in everyone's mind. It's over. However, no one saw that darkness was spreading under the gravel under Chen Zhao's feet. This was mainly because it was night time. Everyone thought that Chen Zhao's ability was to control water. Can you die in peace now? Not enough, not enough. Chen Zhao shook his head. If you want me to die, you better be prepared for enough casualties. Nonsense. You won't have the chance to hurt one of my sisters. Whoosh! Suddenly, a stream of black liquid shot out from the sand. The black liquid turned into an extremely sharp blade and pierced through a Valkyrie's body. The Valkyrie spat out a mouthful of blood in pain and immediately tried to disintegrate her body. But the next moment, the dark lava turned into a cover and enveloped the Valkyrie. In the end, it shrank back into the sand. But soon, a ball of golden light exploded from the ground. The Valkyrie escaped from the sand. She looked extremely pathetic as she vomited out the dark lava. Looks like the old trick won't work. Chen Zhao pursed his lips. Chen Zhao's dark lava could devour dark creatures of similar elements. The dark lava had also developed to an unimaginable level through this method. But it couldn't devour enemies of other elements. For example, the Valkyrie's golden flames weren't holy light, but they were still holy and inviolable. The dark lava's element was the complete opposite of theirs. It couldn't be compatible with their power, nor could it devour them. You've been forced to fall. The leading Valkyrie was even more furious. Let the Heavenly Father's flames purify your body and soul. Countless golden beams exploded at the same time, shooting at Chen Zhao. The flames made Chen Zhao feel pain and unbearable. Dark lava immediately covered Chen Zhao's body, blocking the golden beam. But Chen Zhao retaliated at the same time. The dark magma continued to shoot into the sky. Both sides continued to bombard each other. Raise the altitude. The leading Valkyrie saw that the situation was bad. Although Chen Zhao was alone, he was too thick-skinned. 1,000 of their companions attacked at the same time, but they couldn't deal any fatal damage to him. On the other hand, Chen Zhao was constantly injuring and even killing their sisters. Therefore, she had to temporarily adjust her tactics and increase her altitude to avoid the invasion of the dark magma. You are very powerful, but the dark matter that flows out of the sewers is not enough for you to win. If you don't run, it should be enough. Chen Zhao looked at the Valkyries, who were raising their heights one by one. A hint of disappointment appeared on his face. Indeed, the dark magma could not shoot to such a high altitude. Furthermore, you're flying so high up, so it's hard for you to deal any more damage to me. Where does this dark matter originate from? What's it called? Dark magma. I named it. Oh no, don't tell them where your power comes from. Dao San wanted to stop her, but it was too late. The Valkyrie smiled proudly. Forbidden dark magma. In an instant, the dark magma completely shrank. Chen Zhao was stunned. He wanted to activate the dark magma again, but he realized that he could not control it at all. Stupid human, you're finally going to pay the price for your stupidity. Fine. Chen Zhao sighed. So the legendary Valkyrie is also a despicable and treacherous coward. As long as we can defeat evil, any method is allowed. I admit that I'm evil, but speaking of victory, I'm still standing here perfectly fine. What right do you have to think that you've won? You've lost the advantage of the battlefield, and now you've lost your weapon. Do you think you can still win? Chen Zhao slowly raised a hand. At the same time, the gravel in front of him slowly gathered into a giant palm. The giant palm was filled with vast power. It was enormous and shocking. Kateri and Ronson were both ordinary people. Although they had experienced a series of encounters before, they were still ordinary people. They had experienced a series of things before. But when they saw the giant palm made of gravel, they were still shocked. To them, this was completely godlike power. Scott Lee was about the same. His level was not high either. His position in the psionic team was also at the bottom. Otherwise, Yang Guo would not have sent him to translate for Dao Tu and Dao San. He had thought that the core members of the psionic team were already the top spiritualists in the spiritual world. But when he saw Chen Zhao, he realized that these so-called top spiritualists were so weak. They were completely different concepts. Force. Dao Tu and Dao San were shocked. They could also use force skillfully, but they could not do something as shocking as Chen Zhao. Everyone's force was different, and the force they borrowed was also different in strength. They did not understand where Chen Zhao had borrowed such a huge force. Moreover, he could withstand such a force and not be overwhelmed by it. The gigantic palm swept across the sky. Whoosh! Dozens of Valkyries were slapped by the giant palm. They would either be smashed into smithereens or sent flying. The Valkyries could only fly higher again. The human before them was definitely the most troublesome human they had ever met. It was unbelievably strong and unreasonable power. They had to use the spirit of speech again. Don't use gravel. In the blink of an eye, the gigantic palm collapsed and dispersed. Chen Zhao had expected this. The leading Valkyrie looked back at the messy formation of the sisters. Her expression was solemn and angry. This time, she was no longer as happy and smug as before when she had sealed one of Chen Zhao's abilities. Come, I'm all ears. You can say a few words of victory now. Do you really think you can win? I really think so. Chen Zhao nodded honestly. The leading Valkyrie did not say anything else. She raised her red spear and shouted, "Sisters, it's time to make our enemies tremble." Chapter 2407. The sparse golden flames once again lit up the entire night sky. Valkyries appeared one after another. The number of Valkyries in the sky had increased to a hopeless number. This was the cautious choice the Valkyrie leader had to make. She didn't know what other trump cards the man before her had. So she had to defeat and kill this enemy in the most cautious way. That was to mobilize the entire Valkyrie army, 10,000 Valkyries. The Valkyries were the strongest army under Odin. Their number would always remain at 10,000. When they suffered losses on the battlefield, they would select strong and brave women from among the human women, bestowing them with great power, and bestowing them with a sacred mission. Both Dao Er and Dao San felt that this was a hopeless battle. Perhaps Chen Zhao still had a trump card. If he was facing the previous 1,000 Valkyries, he might have a chance of winning. But now the number of Valkyries had increased by 10 times. This was a hopeless situation. Chen Zhao raised his head and looked at the Valkyrie leader. "Sisters, victory belongs to us. Show this fallen one our power." This time, the Valkyries didn't attack Chen Zhao with golden flames. They charged at Chen Zhao one after the other. They stabbed at Chen Zhao with their red spears. Chen Zhao sneered. His figure suddenly flashed. Cloning. 32 clones appeared before the Valkyries. Seeing Chen Zhao's cloning, Dao Er and Dao San couldn't help but be shocked. This was a real cloning technique. No, it was even more advanced than the cloning techniques they knew in the past. With their eyesight, they could obviously tell that the 32 clones were all unbelievably powerful. In an instant, countless Valkyries and Chen Zhao's 32 clones were engaged in battle. It was a bloody battle. Blood and flesh interweaved to create an extremely cruel scene. But it was also a merciless massacre. No matter how many ants there were, they were still ants. The Valkyrie leader frowned. She saw Chen Zhao and his clones brutally killing her sisters. She couldn't bear it, but she couldn't show it. Power stop. Just then, Chen Zhao's real body suddenly felt weak. His power had completely turned into that of a normal person. This feeling of weakness made Chen Zhao very uncomfortable. Fortunately, the Valkyrie's spirit of speech only worked on Chen Zhao's real body. It was ineffective against Chen Zhao's avatar, because those clones weren't real clones. Instead, they were part of Chen Zhao's consciousness. They could also be seen as individuals. At the same time, hundreds of Valkyries fell from the sky. Chen Zhao's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't attacked them, so how did they fall? I understand now. Dao Er could not help but yell when he saw this. Dao San's reaction was a little slow. He immediately shouted, "I understand too. Your Excellency, although the Valkyrie's words conceal your abilities, they have to bear the same amount of pressure. The more abilities and powers you have sealed, the more pressure they have to bear," Dao Ji reminded him. Chen Zhao's eyes lit up. "I see." Chen Zhao couldn't help but smile. Giant spirit divinization. Chen Zhao was immediately covered in a layer of golden light. Instantly, Chen Zhao's power increased again. The original feeling of weakness was gone. Power seal. Seeing this, the Valkyrie leader had to use the same trick. However, in the giant spirit divinization, Chen Zhao's power was more than 10 times stronger than before. Instantly, countless Valkyries fell from the sky. The golden flames on their bodies also became extremely weak. "Disintegrate the clones," the Valkyrie leader ordered again. However, this time, it didn't work on Chen Zhao or the other avatars. How? Why is it ineffective? Are those not clones? The Valkyrie leader's expression was very ugly. Chen Zhao suddenly turned into a body of energy and shot into the sky. All the Valkyries along the way were instantly pierced through by Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao's real body was unstoppable. Meanwhile, Chen Zhao's avatar didn't stop killing. Everyone was stunned by this scene. Valkyries kept falling from the sky. At the same time, there was a rain of blood. "Sisters, come back." Just then, all the Valkyries in the sky disappeared. Only the Valkyrie leader was left. The Valkyrie leader glared at Chen Zhao with hatred. "Human, you're very strong, but you haven't won yet." "Really?" Chen Zhao shrugged. He didn't need to explain too much. Facts spoke louder than words. Weren't the corpses all over the ground enough to prove the truth? The Valkyrie leader looked at her sisters who had been brutally murdered. Sorrow welled up in her heart. Sisters, come back. Just then, the corpses started turning into specks of starlight. Even the blood they'd spilled on the ground started turning into starlight. The scene was like a river of stars. It was very relaxing. Is it the last attack? Chen Zhao looked at the Valkyrie leader warily. But just then, the Valkyrie leader turned into a beam of light and shot into the night sky. Chen Zhao looked at the beam of light that disappeared into the night sky. He was still on guard. Was it a powerful move that descended from the sky? But after waiting for a long time, the Valkyrie still didn't use her full power. Chen Zhao was a bit shocked. It couldn't have run away, right? The Valkyrie who'd been so fearless just a moment ago couldn't have run away so suddenly, right? After waiting for another minute, Chen Zhao was finally sure. Fuck, she really ran away. Chen Zhao let out a long breath. He withdrew his avatar and walked toward the crowd. Everyone was on guard against Chen Zhao's approach. They knew that being on guard was useless against Chen Zhao. But their instinctive fear couldn't be avoided. Who's Ronson? Sir. What's wrong? Ronson was scared. He believed that he definitely didn't know the man before him. He also didn't understand why this strange and terrifying man would mention his name. Had he or one of his relatives been caught by him before? Ronson had encountered this in the past too. After catching a suspect, the suspect's family and friends would come to him for revenge. Just as Ronson's thoughts were running wild, Chen Zhao said, "Your deputy chief asked me to come and save you." Deputy chief? You mean David? Ronson's jaw dropped. His face was filled with disbelief. The newly transferred deputy chief could actually find such a terrifying guy? Did the deputy chief have some powerful background? It really seemed possible. After all, David was only in his early 30s. But he was already the deputy chief of LAPD. It was extremely rare to see a deputy chief at this age in America. Chapter 2408. Just then Chen Zhao's phone rang. Chen Zhao picked it up. It was Yanghua. Chen Zhao, where are you? I've walked 100 kilometers out to sea and didn't see you. Did I go in the wrong direction? Or did something happen? Previously, Chen Zhao and Yanghua had traveled together to search for Dao Air, Dao San and the others. However, Yanghua couldn't keep up with Chen Zhao's speed. Through Amon and Little Nine, Chen Zhao had sensed the danger from Dao Air and Dao San. That was why Chen Zhao left first, while Yanghua found a small boat. However, when Yanghua arrived at the original battlefield, he realized that the nearby sea was calm. It was as if nothing had happened. Chen Zhao and the others were nowhere to be seen. Yanghua had no choice but to call Chen Zhao after searching for nothing. We're in the desert now. We don't know our exact location yet. Chen Zhao was helpless too. He didn't know where Ms. Wu had taken them either. However, this shouldn't be a California desert. Judging from the grains of sand on the ground, it should be an even older desert. There were so many deserts in the world. Actually, the sand in each desert was different. Depending on the age of desertification, the amount of rainfall, and the geological structure, the degree of desertification would be different. Chen Zhao wasn't an expert in this area, but he knew the basics. Where are my two seniors? How are they now? Chen Zhao glanced at Dao Air and Dao San. They seem to be injured. It looks pretty serious. Hearing this, Yanghua panicked. Are their lives in danger? I don't think so, Chen Zhao said. Yanghua finally heaved a sigh of relief. What about Scott Lee? How is he? Who's Scott Lee? I sent him to translate for my two seniors, Yanghua said. Oh, is he from your psionic team? Chen Zhao narrowed his eyes. He scanned the crowd and finally locked onto Scott Lee. Ronson had already confirmed his identity. Katie didn't look like a translator. When Chen Zhao first saw Scott Lee, he thought that he was also from China. He thought that Dao Air and Dao San had brought him out, and was a disciple of Dragon Tiger Mountain's celestial sect. Hearing Yanggua's words, Chen Zhao realized that he was from the psionic team. That Scott Lee is dead, Chen Zhao said. Hearing that, Yanghua felt like he was struck by lightning. He was speechless. He's dead. That's right. He died a horrible death. He was directly vaporized. Not even his bones were left. Dao San, and the others were not far from him. Hearing Chen Zhao's conversation, Scott Lee mumbled something about not even leaving a corpse behind. It wasn't anything, but when Chen Zhao said that, he was clearly looking at him. This scared Lee very much. At this moment he was racking his brains. How had he offended Chen Zhao? But after thinking for a long time, he couldn't remember knowing Chen Zhao. After hanging up, Chen Zhao approached Scott Lee. "You're Scott Lee, right?" "Yes, I am, sir. What's the matter?" "You're from the psionic team?" "I am. I'm the president of the supernatural organization." Scott Lee's expression instantly became very interesting. Although he had only joined the psionic team for a short period of time, this didn't stop him from knowing that the psionic team's nemesis was the supernatural organization. Usually, all he heard was how the psionic team would surpass the supernatural organization. Originally, Scott Lee had thought that the psionic team was so strong, it would only take a few minutes for them to surpass the supernatural organization. But after hearing Chen Zhao's self-introduction, Scott Lee couldn't help but feel fear. Was the psionic team going to become enemies with such a terrifying existence? Wasn't that too reckless? The so-called experts in the psionic team would probably be slapped to death by Chen Zhao. Thinking of this, Scott Lee couldn't help but shiver. Slap. Chen Zhao slapped Scott Lee's head. "I'm talking to you. How dare you daydream?" I'm sorry." Scott Lee immediately lowered his head and apologized. He couldn't offend him. "Huh? Where do you live? I'll send you home." Chen Zhao grinned at Scott Lee. I. Scott Lee could tell that Chen Zhao was threatening him. "If you don't want to go home, then you can stay with the supernatural organization for a while. How about that?" Scott Lee lowered his head and thought for a while. Finally he nodded. Scott Lee knew that Chen Zhao was subtly detaining him. Then Chen Zhao looked at Dao 2 and Dao 3. "You're old Zhang's disciples?" "Old Zhang. Zhang Tianyi," Chen Zhao said. "We're the Celestial Master's disciples. We're Yanggua's seniors." Chen Zhao looked at their ages. At their age, people might even believe that they were Yanggua's grandfathers. But considering Zhang Tianyi's age, it was reasonable for his disciples to have such a large age gap. Chen Zhao called Zhang Tianyi again. "Hey old Zhang, did you miss me?" An angry voice came from the other end. "You dog, you had to call me now. You caused me to be killed alone." Chen Zhao didn't put it on speakerphone, but Zhang Tianyi's voice was too ear-piercing. Dao 2 and Dao 3 had to listen even if they wanted to. They'd never heard Zhang Tianyi speak in such a tone. In the past, they'd always been steady and gentle. In the end, the first thing Chen Zhao said was vulgarities. Their jaws dropped. "I did another good thing today." "Good thing? You?" "Yeah, I've been accumulating merit recently. If you kill less, that'll be the greatest merit. Do you know what it means to kill for a noble cause?" "I kill to save people." "Fuck. That's fucking killing for a noble cause. It means sacrificing oneself to achieve great things. What fucking killing to save people? If there's nothing else, don't disturb my advancement match. Not only did I kill people today, but I also saved a few people. None of my business." 2 old men were among the people I saved, but they should be dying soon. I see that they're in so much pain that I can't bear to see them continue to be tortured. So I plan to send them on their way. Give me a plan. Dao 2 and Dao 3 were dumbfounded. What did he mean by dying soon? "We didn't." The two wanted to explain, but the next moment, their mouths were covered by dark lava. "Dao 2, Dao 3? Zhang Tianyi heard a voice beside him. "What happened to them?" "Something like that. They encountered demons and were seriously injured. They can't be saved." Chapter 2409. Can I say one last thing to them? "No, they can't speak, see, or hear now," Chen Zhao said. "But I have a life-saving medicine. It's very effective, and can bring them back to life in a matter of minutes. It's just that the formula is a bit expensive." "Then help me find a good place to bury them," Zhang Tianyi said angrily. He knew that Chen Zhao was trying to extort him again. Sure. Chen Zhao didn't give Zhang Tianyi a way out. "I think the place where they're buried is good. With the protection of their ancestors, their descendants will definitely become rich in the future." Oh, the refreshing cleansing pill I promised you last time is already on the way. But I forgot whether to send it to Shintong or Yuantong. Why don't you pay attention? Chen Zhao pursed his lips. Oh, your grand disciple's surname Yang seems to be heading this way. I think that with his close relationship with his senior brother, he'll definitely be devastated if he finds out that the two of them died in a foreign land. He might even be in so much pain that he wants to die and want to commit suicide. You win. I have some purple heart bamboo seeds. I'll use them to exchange for my grand disciple's life. How about that? What are you saying? Your grand disciple is my grand disciple. Would I purposely harm their lives? Yes, I was wrong. Please save my grand disciple, okay? But what's that purple heart bamboo? It's not anything good. When it grows up, the bamboo joints will automatically brew bamboo heart dew. It can make people not age, and there won't be any side effects. Chen Zhao's eyes brightened. It could make people not age. Is it really that magical? But it can only make people not age. It can't make them become young again, Zhang Tianyi said. Zhang Tianyi said. For example, if a 60-year-old man drank the bamboo heart dew, he would not become 50 years old. Instead, his appearance would forever remain that of a 60-year-old. What about bodily functions? Actually, this bamboo heart dew is a liquid that slows down the aging of the human body, but it's mostly external. The internal functions can also slow down aging to a certain extent, but the effect isn't very good. This is also good stuff. You're really willing to give it to me? Of course, no matter how good things are, they are still external objects. All right, I'll reluctantly save your grand disciple. After hanging up the call with Zhang Tianyi, Chen Zhao released Dao Er and Dao San. Sir, this is not a good idea. What's wrong with that? Do you think I'm a volunteer? Chen Zhao interrupted Dao 2 and Dao 3. If you don't think I'm right, then call Zhang Tianyi personally, and tell him that you're tired of living. Tell him not to trade with me. Dao Er and Dao San looked at each other and sighed heavily. Then, he contacted West and asked him to use his phone to locate them. Soon Chen Zhao found out their current location. They were now in the desert near the city of San Luis Rio Colorado in Mexico. It was less than 600 kilometers away from Los Angeles. This was within Chen Zhao's expectations. After all, if it was too far, there would definitely be a time difference. When he was teleported to this desert, he had already observed the starry sky. There wasn't much difference. That was why he had guessed that they hadn't moved too far. However, Chen Zhao had to send Amon and Little Nine back to the sea first. The two of them were still rolling in the sand. Although they wouldn't get dehydrated, at their current speed, they would never be able to return to the sea without help. They were still in San Luis Rio Colorado, but the southern side of the desert was connected to the sea. Along the way it was all desert. There were no towns or inhabited areas. Chen Zhao looked at everyone. Do you want to go back to Los Angeles yourself, or do you want me to send you? Just as Scott Lee was about to speak, Chen Zhao interrupted him. I'm not asking you. Come with me. We're in the country illegally, right? If we leave the Mexican border, we won't be able to explain how we got in, Ronson said helplessly. And we might be arrested as spies. Fine, it doesn't matter if you come with us. Chen Zhao's original goal for this trip was to accept David's request to find and protect Ronson. And him, Ronson said, pointing at Katie. Him. Don't be fooled by his looks. He's actually our undercover agent. Fine. Chen Zhao looked at Dao Er and Dao San. What about you two? If it's convenient, you can take us with you too. They were from the spiritual world, but they'd entered Mexico for no reason. It wasn't easy to leave the regular route. You guys go carry him on. Little Nine, you keep him on occupied. They couldn't agree with the names Chen Zhao had given his pets. For example, Little Nine. Looking at the 100-meter-long hydra, they couldn't tell that it had such a cute name. At first, they were still curious about how Chen Zhao would move these two huge things. But soon they understood. Chen Zhao lifted Amon and Little Nine, who was wrapped around Amon's stomach. They flew into the air and then flew at high speed. Little Nine's weight had already reached 2,000 tons, and Amon's weight was 10 times that of Little Nine. Chen Zhao was actually able to carry these two enormous creatures and fly at an astonishing speed. In less than 10 minutes, they could already see the horizon. Chen Zhao threw Amon's huge body into the sea, raising huge waves. On the other hand, Dao Er, Dao San, Ronson, Katie, and Scott Lee were hung in the air by a bunch of grapes. Fortunately, Chen Zhao didn't plan on carrying them back to Los Angeles. In the end, he let them enjoy a free luxury sea trip. When they arrived in Los Angeles, it was already dawn. Watch your mouths. Chen Zhao looked at Katie and Ronson. Both of them nodded silently. They both knew that Chen Zhao was different from other gangsters. They weren't afraid of gangsters, but they really didn't have the courage to face Chen Zhao. As for Dao Er and Dao San, Chen Zhao couldn't threaten them either. After all, they had Zhang Tianyi, a god, behind them. Let's go, Chen Zhao said, glancing at Scott Lee. Although Scott Lee was extremely unwilling, he still followed behind Chen Zhao. I'll give you a chance to tell your family that you're safe. For a long time in the future, you won't have a chance to contact the outside world again. In the end, Scott Lee called his family and obediently followed Chen Zhao to the headquarters of the supernatural organization. Chapter 2410. It was Scott Lee's first time at the supernatural organization's headquarters. Perhaps it was because of his first impression. In his imagination, the supernatural organization's headquarters must be very mysterious. There was a hint of coldness in every corner. Scott Lee did not know that the coldness he felt was because of the dense dark clouds above the headquarters. That was the oppressive feeling that the domain gave him. Seeing that Chen Zhao had brought Scott Lee in, Wes was stunned. He was usually in charge of the supernatural organization's affairs, including monitoring the psionic team. Therefore, he roughly knew the names, appearances, and backgrounds of the members of the psionic team. Thus, he knew that Scott Lee was from the psionic team the moment he saw him. Seiji's first thought was whether the other psionic ability teams were also using spies to deal with them, just like they were. Had Chen Zhao been tricked by this guy? But after Chen Zhao explained a little, West understood. Scott Lee was from the psionic team and had seen Chen Zhao's power. If Scott Lee returned to the psionic team and told them about it, perhaps the psionic team would give up on fighting the supernatural organization. But it was more likely that they would speed up their actions. By then, it wouldn't be so easy for the supernatural organization to deal with the psionic team. That was why Chen Zhao had detained Scott Lee out of caution. I'll leave him to you. Chen Zhao pushed Scott Lee to West's side. West glanced at Scott Lee, who was trembling in fear. Kid, how should I address you? Scott Lee. Lee, why did you choose the psionic team? Why not the supernatural organization? Do you have an open recruitment? Wes was speechless. The supernatural organization was an elite organization. Chen Zhao and West had personally gone to inspect and appraise almost every member. Or it was the member's family, or someone they could trust. Tell me about the internal affairs of the psionic team. Wes would not let go of any chance to learn about the psionic team. At this moment, Lin Beyonce walked over angrily. Scott Lee took a few steps back when he saw the murderous look on Lin Beyonce's face. Newbie, am I scary? Are you going to hide from me? Lin Beyonce yelled at Scott Lee with a dark face. Beyonce, how was it? Did you pass the first level? Just a little bit more, and I would have passed. Lin Beyonce gritted her teeth. Although Lindsay Beyonce was half forced to join the supernatural organization. However, after a period of getting along, she had gradually accepted her identity. Of course, with her bad temper, she still refused to give in. He didn't have a good expression when he saw everyone. However, she had provoked a lot of people and was taught a lesson by many. Therefore, she knew that most of the people in the association were stronger than her. There were many people who had taught her a lesson. Basically, the top few people in the association had all taught her a lesson. 2 days ago, after the end of the Battle of Holy Glory, Gaia and the others returned. Lin Beyonce also mocked the 10 people who went to battle. They said that they went to participate in the Battle of Holy Glory. But in the end, only one of them obtained the title of Holy Glory's top 100. It was a complete disgrace. Then she was taught a harsh lesson. Lin Beyonce belonged to the new generation that both Chen Zhao and West thought highly of. Of course, her personality still needed to be polished. The way to do that was to use the iron fists of her friend's love. Just then an extremely cold aura surged from Scott Lee's back. Scott Lee shivered. Looking back, he realized that it was a spirit. However, a layer of white frost formed on the path the spirit body took. Even though she didn't get close and only passed by him, Scott Lee still felt a chill from the depths of his soul. Seeing Pamela approach, Lynn Beyoncé stopped talking and retreated. On her third day in the association, she had the honor of witnessing how terrifying Pamela was. The scariest people in the association weren't Gaia, Noah, or Hallie's. It was Lady Pamela before her. She was an extremely terrifying banshee. Other than Chen Zhao, no one in the association dared to say that they could defeat Pamela. Of course, Pamela wasn't alone. She also had an army of banshees. They were one of the hidden trump cards of the supernatural organization. However, even without Chen Zhao, the supernatural organization had enough power to protect themselves. If she offended Gaia and the others, she would be bedridden for a few days at most. Even if she talked back to Chen Zhao, he would at most beat her up. But if she offended Pamela, she might turn into a block of ice and be displayed in front of the headquarters for a few days. It was because she had experienced such things. That was why Lynn Beyoncé kept her distance from Pamela. Okay, time for breakfast. What's this morning? Although Lindsay Beyoncé hated the world, the air, and the people and the things that happened were not pleasing to her eyes. However, the 3 meals here were the only things that satisfied her. The ghost chef's cooking was really good. What made her even more addicted were the ingredients here. Everything couldn't be found outside. It was impossible to describe how precious these ingredients were. Many of the food here belonged to the legendary level, especially since Lynn Beyoncé was an enhancer. She could feel the benefits of the food even more clearly. Not to mention her magic power. Her body was at least 5 times stronger than before she joined the supernatural organization. Scott Lee stayed there for a day. Even though his freedom was not restricted, he wasn't restricted, but he could clearly feel a pair of eyes watching him. If he dared to step out of the headquarters, he might be beheaded in the next moment. In the evening, Scott Lee saw the people of the supernatural organization building a bonfire with all kinds of ingredients and seasonings. It seemed like they were going to have a bonfire party. At this moment, Gatkala was pushing a flatbed cart with a very large piece of meat on it. They couldn't tell what it was, but it was at least 2,000 kilograms. It was a complete piece of meat. Farspen, you're in charge of cooking it. Everyone was looking forward to it too, because it was from Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao didn't tell them what it was, but they were sure that it was a magical beast he'd hunted. From the looks of this piece of meat, it should be a piece of meat from its thigh. But this piece of meat already weighed 2 tons. Then, how big was this magical beast's body? But everyone was already used to it. They were already used to seeing what kind of magical beast Chen Zhao hunted. Chapter 24:11. The piece of meat Chen Zhao had given him was a piece of Red Eagle's thigh. It wasn't even 1,000th of the Red Eagle's thigh. Red Eagle's body was too huge. When it spread its wings, it could cover the entire city. His body was as big as a mountain. Back then, Chen Zhao couldn't do anything about Red Eagle. He couldn't finish such a huge body by himself. That was why he gave it to his own people. If everyone worked together, they might be able to eat Red Eagle into a skeleton in 100 years. Of course, that was if the number of members in the association increased by several times. With just a few dozen people, they wouldn't be able to finish such a huge Red Eagle in 1,000 years. But Chen Zhao didn't mind. Anyway, that thing wouldn't rot in his space ring. If he couldn't finish it, then so be it. Chen Zhao was still troubled by the mutant octopus. The scale of the disaster was still expanding. A few coastal cities on the west coast were all in trouble. Chen Zhao had hoped that Isaac could provide him with clues about Homesius. But Isaac couldn't find anyone either. Just as Chen Zhao was having a headache, someone he didn't expect called him. Hey Chen, it's Gavich. Huh, Gavich, what's up? I heard you're in trouble. You're not calling to mock me, are you? Or you're the culprit? Oh, your main business is producing chemical materials. Did you release something you shouldn't have and cause this disaster? Chen, I'm a legal businessman. Lila Gavich chuckled. I was going to give you some information, but since you don't need it, forget it. Ha. I'm joking. Where are you now? I'll go find you. I brewed a batch of good wine recently. It was Chen Zhao's first time visiting Lila Gavich's house. Lila Gavich was the largest chemical producer in America. He was much richer than Chen Zhao. Although Chen Zhao was rich, he'd only made it in the past 2 years. But Lila Gavich was different. He'd accumulated it for decades. Chen Zhao didn't even dare to imagine how rich he was. In America, one had to have an extremely deep background to play with a few industries. Energy, medicine, and chemical industries were all controlled by traditional families. It was almost impossible for outsiders to intervene, even if it was to develop a new product. This new product would either be sold to those tycoons or all sorts of dirty water. Lila Gavich lived in Beverly Hills. However, it was not in the coastal area. Instead, it was halfway up a mountain. Looking down from here, one could see the entire horizon. Lila Gavich's villa was different from Chen Zhao's modern and technological feeling. His manor was filled with the stench of a nobleman. Chen Zhao had been to many manors of rich people. Lila Gavich's villa might not be the biggest or the most luxurious, but every little thing here was filled with a sense of exquisiteness and taste. This reminded him of the British drama Downton Abbey that Feilai had forced him to watch. Chen Zhao didn't really look at it, but everything here looked like an old-fashioned English noble's manor in British dramas. Everything here was simple but not old, deep but not gloomy. Here, there was also the bright and beautiful sunlight, as well as the boundless spring scenery. Lila Gavich was wearing a formal suit. He had a table and a chair on the huge lawn, leisurely drinking afternoon tea. When Chen Zhao walked up to Lila Gavich, the servant had already come over to add a chair. You know how to enjoy yourself. Rich people do, Lila Gavich said. The servant went up to add some refreshments for Chen Zhao. How did you know I was in trouble? Chen Zhao asked curiously. I've been paying attention to the supernatural organization, Lila Gavich said with a smile. Lila Gavich said with a smile. And the mutant octopus attacks in recent days are not a secret. Although the news media has been banned, it is not difficult for most rich people to find out about it. What news did you get? 2 pieces of information. Lila Gavich placed the 2 pieces of information before Chen Zhao. One is about Homesius, and the other is about the new news agency's research institute. You know the progress of my investigation? Chen Zhao asked, confused. You investigated Homesius through an intermediary company. You want to know what's going on with the house called Homesius. Do you think the intermediary company can keep the secret? Then what's the situation with the research institute? They're the culprits of the mutant octopus attack. You actually found out about this. Coincidentally, I sell chemical products, and this Xinsha Research Institute is one of my company's clients. Then what about Homesius? What's his situation? He's the person in charge of the research institute, but we haven't found out who the sponsor is yet. All the money that goes into the research institute is through an anonymous overseas account. We can't find out. Then we only need the research institute's address. We don't need Homesius information, right? All the equipment and researchers of the Xinsha Research Institute disappeared overnight. Now, the Xinsha Research Institute still owes my company tens of millions of dollars in payments. You're saying that they've already run away? Yes. Chen Zhao couldn't help but look gloomy. With a headache, he asked. Are the leads broken? There's another direction we can investigate. Lila Gavich's gaze landed on Homesius information in Chen Zhao's hands. Homesius? He should have disappeared too, right? Yes, indeed. Homesius disappeared too. But his family moved frequently in the past few years. They're living on a small ranch in the suburbs of Los Angeles now. You're not asking me to capture Homesius' family, right? There's a rule in the spiritual world that we shouldn't harm family members. This wasn't a rule, but it was also the bottom line. Chen Zhao didn't want to touch this bottom line. I didn't say I'm going to touch Homesius' family, but my people are already secretly monitoring them. That should be fine, right? Chen Zhao nodded. That was fine. Chen Zhao wasn't that pedantic. Even the police often monitored the families of suspects in order to catch them. I'll also send people to monitor Homesius' family. Of course, aside from the 10 million, I have nothing to do with this. Chapter 24:12. For Lila Gavich. Perhaps $10 million really wasn't much. It was the same for Chen Zhao. Perhaps he could spend more than that once. But if it was in the business world, they would fight for every cent. Two teams of lawyers might argue for a few months, just for 0.1% of profit. This was very common in the business world. So Lila Gavich couldn't be as indifferent as he seemed. Chen Zhao was the same. For example, the movies he, Steven, and Rasfa invested in. The three of them could give each other millions, or even tens of millions of dollars in gifts. But they couldn't be short of the share of the box office, even if it was just a cent. That was the bottom line of business investment. A cent less today might mean a zero tomorrow. Of course, the reason why Lila Gavich let Chen Zhao deal with him was mainly because he wanted to do Chen Zhao a favor. He wanted to do Chen Zhao a favor. Or rather, he wanted to return the favor. The two of them had been through life and death together. After all, he'd fallen into hell back then. Chen Zhao had killed his way into hell. From then on, he understood how terrifying Chen Zhao was. He also knew that having an ally and friend like Chen Zhao was something to be grateful for. Of course, the $10 million debt was another matter. If he had the chance, he wouldn't give up on the debt from the New Society Research Institute. Just because he wanted to do Chen Zhao a favor didn't mean he would give up on the 10 million. Should we go to the research institute? Maybe we can find some clues. Is it far from here? Not really. Actually, I've never been there before. Saying that, Lila Gavich turned to the servant beside him. Call Merlin here. Merlin? Who is it? Oh, one of my lawyers, Lila Gavich said. Because the New Society Research Institute can't pay up, and they're suspected of maliciously defaulting. They're planning to use the Research Institute to pay off the debt. She's also responsible for this. Chen Zhao had thought that Merlin was a beautiful lawyer like Alex. But when Merlin came, Chen Zhao was greatly disappointed. Merlin was already more than 50 years old. Although he was dressed simply and professionally, Merlin was already in his 50s. However, he didn't have the feeling Chen Zhao had expected. Merlin didn't know Chen Zhao, so he only greeted Lila Gavich. Boss. Well, how's the situation at the Xinsha Research Institute? At present, because the court can't find the legal person, it ruled that the Xinsha Research Institute has seriously breached the contract and maliciously defaulted on the payment. The court has agreed to our request. Now the Xinsha Research Institute and the surrounding land are ours. You've done well. Take us to the Xinsha Research Institute. I want to see my new territory. Chen Zhao and Lila Gavich sat in the back seat, chatting casually. Although Merlin was driving, she could be said to be observant and attentive. She had been listening to their conversation. She was curious about who Chen Zhao was. Have you had any use for your Hydra recently? Asked Lila Gavich. What? Are you going to see? Yeah, I'm taking a few foreign partners out to play, so I'm going to borrow your Hydra. You don't have a yacht. Lila Gavich was much richer than Chen Zhao. Therefore, Chen Zhao didn't believe that Lila Gavich didn't have a yacht. Yes, I have 2 yachts, but they're both more than 20 years old. Most of the equipment can't keep up with the times. It's fine if it's a normal trip, but I'm using it to entertain a few super rich people. The 2 yachts aren't very presentable. Oh, then send someone to my house to get them, Chen Zhao said. Chen Zhao didn't have any plans to go out to sea, so he generously lent the Hydra to Lila Gavich. Merlin's heart jumped. This Asian man was also rich. She'd boarded Lila Gavich's yacht before. Just luxurious wasn't enough to describe the 2 super yachts. But even those extravagant super yachts weren't enough? Then how luxurious would the yacht that Lila Gavich borrowed from Chen Zhao be? Do you have any large investments recently? Lila Gavich asked again. Huh? Why do you ask that? Your friends have recently been selling some second and third tier assets to cash out, and they have also made large loans with the bank. This situation is either they are in urgent need of money, or there is a financial shock. If it is a financial shock, it is impossible for me to not know about it. So I can only guess that they are in urgent need of money and are making some kind of investment. The so-called second-tier assets were those whose annual profits didn't exceed 1 to 2% of the investment. Basically, after deducting the interest from the debt, the second-tier assets would at most not lose money. It was far from a profit. Nevertheless, even the second-tier assets were still very popular in the financial market. For example, the big shots on Wall Street didn't lack money. What they lacked was how to turn their cash into assets that wouldn't depreciate. On the other hand, the third-tier assets were those that were below the profit line. They might lose a little this year and make a little profit next year. They could barely break even and survive. If the third-tier assets could be sold at a break-even price, the second-tier assets could be sold at a premium of more than 20%. The bank would classify and evaluate the assets. For example, the first-tier assets were considered high-quality assets. The second-tier assets were assets with more than 5% profit. These assets were hard to come by. There were also super and excellent assets. It was normal for them to be sold at a premium of 200 or 300%. For example, Chen Zhao's Marina restaurant was an excellent asset. The bank's valuation was only 80 million, but it had considerable profit. Even if someone offered 5 times that, there would still be people fighting for it. As for Chen Zhao's Mountain Brewery and brand, they were priceless treasures. Perhaps Mountain Brewery's market valuation couldn't even enter the world's top 500, but its profit could enter the world's top 100. Those people are all your friends. At present, the total amount of funds they have raised should be more than 3 billion USD, and you have a lot of cash on hand. Based on my estimation, the cash on hand should be more than 1.5 billion US dollars, so I have to suspect that their intention to borrow cash and loans is to have some kind of investment project. Hearing their conversation, Merlin felt his heart skip a beat. Wasn't this man too rich? What did 1.5 billion in cash mean? Even the richest man in the world didn't have 1.5 billion in cash. It would even be difficult for them to take out 100 million on the spot. But this man actually had 1.5 billion US dollars. Chapter 24:13. There's a project. If you have spare cash, you can use a few $100 million and put it in your account for a month or two. Your and your friend's cash flow should be close to 5 billion, right? Isn't it enough? It's not enough, Chen Zhao said. It's just that the plate is too big. No amount of money is enough. Chen Zhao wasn't going to build a normal coastal island. He was going to build a super resort like Hawaii. The amount of money he needed in the early stage was gone. This didn't even include the subsequent investment. So this project wasn't something normal people could afford. What project? I can't tell you yet, Chen Zhao said. Lila Gavich thought about it. The project Chen Zhao was talking about didn't even have a shadow yet. To him, even if the project disappeared, he would only lose 1 or 2 months of interest. It wasn't a big deal. Okay, I'll prepare it later. What's the maximum investment? Prepare as much as you have. It depends on your appetite. The more you invest, the more shares you'll get. How big is this project? I don't think there'll be such a big project in the world in the next 10 years, Chen Zhao said. Mr. Chen, how much money do I need to be qualified? Merlin asked while driving. Sorry, I can't qualify no matter how much money you have, Chen Zhao said, smiling. When Chen Zhao was distributing the cake, he also looked at the people. Acquaintances depended on whether they had enough capital, connections, and influence. For example, a celebrity like Steven was welcomed by 99% of the investment projects in the world. As for those he wasn't familiar with, Chen Zhao wouldn't let them in no matter how much money they had. He didn't even have enough for his own family. Why should he give it to outsiders? Merlin smiled and shook her head. She obviously knew what Chen Zhao meant. However, she was only asking a probing question. She didn't think that Chen Zhao would let a stranger in. Soon, they arrived at the New Press Research Institute. Chen Zhao looked at the building before him. It was around 7 or 8 stories tall. There was a large empty space around it for greenery. This building costs 2 or 3 million, right? This building can barely make up for it, Lila Gavich said disapprovingly. Let's go in and take a look inside. Boss, Mr. Chen. This building was originally used for some experimental research. We found some chemical materials in there earlier. I haven't sent people in to disinfect and clean it up. If we go in now, there's a certain risk. Haha. I'm a chemical producer. Why would I be afraid of those chemicals? Lila Gavik said with a smile. Those chemicals don't know the boss. It's okay. I brought a doctor with me. He knows better than I do what's dangerous. Doctor? Merlin was stunned at first, but he quickly reacted. Mr. Chen is a doctor? I'm a doctor, Chen Zhao answered. Merlin did not expect Chen Zhao to be a doctor. Of course, Chen Zhao was an illegal doctor too. Even though Chen Zhao was a professor, he didn't have the qualifications to practice medicine. If I can't get the money back, although this building can barely cover the interest, I'll still need to invest a lot of money to repair and use the building. In the end, I won't be able to earn anything. Lila Gavik was a very smart businessman. He was different from normal businessmen. Normal businessmen thought that if they bought something for $5 and sold it for 10, they would earn $5. But Lila Gavik considered more complicated things, such as the time cost, investment profits, interest, currency depreciation, and so on. Even a lawyer like Merlin felt emotional. Just a moment ago, the two had been discussing investments of hundreds of millions, or even billions of dollars. Now, they had to carefully calculate the investment of $1 or $2 million. But this was the basic quality of a successful businessman. A businessman who could not be calculative was not a qualified businessman. Chen Zhao, Lila Gavik, and Merlin walked around the building. They did not find anything valuable. It's a little strange, Merlin suddenly said. What's strange? The amount of materials in the building is wrong. What's wrong? Didn't the original person in charge move them away? What's strange about that? Neither Chen Zhao nor Lila Gavik understood what Merlin meant. First of all, they moved in a hurry. Also, they moved secretly, so there can't be too big of a commotion, Merlin said. Merlin said, based on the amount of chemical raw materials our company sold to them, the cost of taking these raw materials away is very high. We just walked around the building, and there are a few individual laboratories that still have a lot of raw materials that have not been opened. There are also a lot of raw materials that have not been opened in the warehouse. Many of these raw materials are not cheap, but the remaining raw materials do not match the total amount. Think about it. If it were you, under what circumstances would you choose to transport some raw materials away? And under what circumstances would you choose to transport some raw materials away? This? Chen Zhao and Lila Gavik glanced at each other. What does this mean? It means that there's a second warehouse here. The new Society Research Institute's building is very clear, so the second warehouse might not be above ground, Merlin said. Merlin said, although I don't know why they want to take the chemical materials, from all the suspicious points, they do have a second warehouse. Chen Zhao and Lila Gavik had to admit that Merlin's thinking was very sharp. At least, they hadn't thought about this possibility. Oh, the button in the elevator seemed to indicate an underground parking lot, Chen Zhao said. But there's already an open-air parking lot here. I don't think they'd make another one, right? Let's go take a look. We'll know soon. The three entered the elevator again and pressed the button for floor 1. When the elevator door opened, Chen Zhao, Lila Gavik, and Merlin were all shocked. It wasn't a hidden warehouse below. Instead, it was an underground laboratory that was even larger than the buildings above ground. I didn't expect such a large underground space to be hidden here. Boss, since this is a hidden laboratory, it means that some secret experiments have been done here. We might be in danger if we go in while wearing isolation suits. It's fine. For Chun, nothing can trouble him, Lila Gavik said confidently. Lila Gavik said confidently, if you're scared, you can wait for us up there. Chapter 24:14. Merlin didn't leave. After all, this was the time to show her loyalty. With her shrewdness, she wouldn't abandon her boss at a time like this. Chen Zhao and Lila Gavik walked in front. There were some water stains on the ground, but it wasn't very dirty overall. After all, they'd only moved here 1 or 2 days ago. This place makes me uncomfortable, Lila Gavik said. There's a magnetic field in the air here, Chen Zhao said. It's probably because some equipment is still running. Even I can't sense further away. Chen Zhao knew what Lila Gavik meant by discomfort. There was a special magnetic field here. It wasn't dangerous, but it was attached to people's skin. There was a special magnetic field here, but it wasn't dangerous. Chen Zhao didn't realize that there was an underground lab when he was above ground. It was also because of the magnetic field here. There shouldn't be anything here, Merlin said. They've moved all the valuable equipment away. The remaining chemicals aren't enough to pay off the debt. I want to know what equipment created the magnetic field here, and how much it's worth, Lilaganic said. Maybe it's not just equipment. There's something else. What? Chen Zhao smiled and didn't answer. There was a faint smell of blood in the air. Apart from that, there was also a fishy smell. Chen Zhao's first reaction was that it was seafood. The three took the elevator down to a deeper area. Thankfully, it wasn't dark, and the basic lighting was still intact. Just then the three saw a room up ahead. There was a sign saying monitoring room on the door. As soon as they reached the door, they saw a line of blood on the ground. Judging from the bloodstains, it seemed like something was dragging a corpse. Let's go in and take a look, Chen Zhao said. Merlin followed behind. She was very uncomfortable with this place. There was a row of screens in the monitoring room, but there were still blood splatters on them. Boss Mr. Chen, how about we leave first? Merlin tried to persuade them again. However, Chen Zhao and Lilaganic ignored Merlin's request. Chen Zhao turned on the screen and switched to the scene from 2 days ago. What appeared on the screen was the scene of the researchers and workers busily moving the equipment away. However, Chen Zhao and Lilaganic noticed that one of the screens was recording what had happened in the lab. The workers were using hammers to break the glass containers along the way. Then, a large amount of liquid flowed out of the glass container, along with some deformed things. These deformed things seemed to be artificially bred, but they were not creatures that ordinary people knew of. Their upper bodies were like snakes, their heads and bodies were slender, but they had a pair of short, thick claws. When Merlin saw those deformed creatures, his face instantly became very ugly. The three of them continued to watch the surveillance footage. Suddenly, one of the deformed creatures went berserk. The deformed creature suddenly wrapped itself around a worker's neck, and then directly covered the worker's head with a bloody mouth. The worker struggled a little and fell to the ground. When the other workers saw this, they wanted to come forward to help. But soon, more deformed creatures released from the containers woke up. These deformed creatures immediately turned the laboratory into a field of blood and flesh splattering everywhere. At this time the alarm sounded. At the same time, the camera was also destroyed, and there was no image after that. However, there were other images, and the figures of the deformed creatures appeared one after another in other images. The researchers began to evacuate even faster. Meanwhile, the security personnel were exchanging fire with the deformed creatures. However, many people were dragged into the shadows by the deformed creatures. Chen Zhao looked at the surveillance footage. Is this a scene from a movie? Maybe reality, Lilaganic said with a bitter smile. By now Merlin's face had already turned pale from fear, because he saw one of the images. This was what had happened in the surveillance room. A deformed creature had appeared at the door of the surveillance room. At that time, the people in the room had been in a hurry to leave. In the end, the two collided head-on. After a series of struggles, the person was forcibly pulled out of the surveillance room. At that time, the person had not died yet. He was dragged all the way, letting out heart-wrenching screams. Check if there's any signal on your phone, Lilaganic said. Merlin hurriedly took out his phone and looked at Lilaganic miserably. We're at least 20 meters from the ground. There's no signal at all. Forget it, Lilaganic cursed. Let's just leave here. So unlucky. We'll have to spend some money to clean this place up again. The three came to the elevator, but the indicator light showed that it was floor -6. But no matter how they pressed, the elevator would not reach their floor. Looks like the elevator here can't be used, Chen Zhao said helplessly. Let's take the stairs. There's no stairs here, Lilaganic said. How do you know? Chen Zhao asked, confused. Lilaganic pointed at a map on a nearby pillar. This elevator seems to be blocked on purpose. It's probably those things, Chen Zhao said. From the surveillance footage, those things are quite intelligent. What do we do now? Merlin's face paled. Maybe we can find another way around, Lila Gavich said. Then what if we encounter those things? Merlin looked at Chen Zhao and Lila Gavich in fear. In terms of probability, it's the same everywhere. We can encounter those things, Lila Gavich said. And in terms of survival, it's much more likely to survive if you're with two men than if you're alone. Chen Zhao looked at the pale-faced Merlin and added another blow. Of course, if we encounter a large number of those things, we'll have a much higher chance of survival if we push you out and escape. Ah, Merlin screamed in fright. Don't be so scared. I'm just joking. How could she not be scared? Merlin only felt that even staying with Chen Zhao and Lila Gavich had become very dangerous. Who knew if they would really use her as bait, as they had joked? Don't come near me. Suddenly, Merlin took out a pepper spray and aimed it at the two. Chen Zhao and Lila Gavich's expressions froze. They were indeed joking, but Merlin seemed to take their joke seriously. 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 24:15. Ah! Just then Merlin had already sprayed the pepper spray. Chen Zhao had seen it earlier and retreated first. Lila Gainik, on the other hand, was not so lucky. She was sprayed directly into her eyes. Merlin! You lunatic, you're fired! Lila Gainik roared as she screamed. Merlin did not care about his job at all. Seeing that Lila Gainik had been sprayed by the pepper spray, she turned and ran. However, she was wearing high heels and could not run fast enough. Chen, why didn't you help me? Merlin is such an idiot. She's pissing me off. Lila Gage still couldn't open his eyes. Chen Zhao looked into Lila Gage's eyes. Her eyes were red and swollen as tears streamed down her cheeks. Is there any way to relieve the pain? My eyes and the skin on my face are burning. It's too painful. There's no way, Chen Zhao said helplessly. Chen Zhao said helplessly. But while it's painful to be hit by the anti-pervert spray, there aren't any side effects. The effect only lasts around 10 minutes, after which the pain will subside. However, the pain will last for a day or two. I don't need a diagnosis. Lila Gainik was still crying. It was too painful. It was also the first time in his life that he was attacked by a pepper spray. Merlin was in a panic and did not know where to go. After running for a while, she realized what was going on. She had reacted too violently just now. But now, when he tried to find his way back, he realized that the layout of this place was all over the place. Every road was the same. Merlin was dumbfounded. What should she do? The place she was at now was not as bright as before. Some of the corridors had even turned into deep abysses. Merlin was panicking now. Everything was silent. It was so quiet that Merlin could hear his own heartbeat. Just then, Merlin heard the sound of water dripping. Suddenly, Merlin felt something cold on his arm. Liquid dripped onto it. Merlin looked up. In that instant, she felt like her head was about to explode. A deformed creature had appeared above her, without her knowing. The deformed creature moved too stealthily. She could not sense how it had appeared at all. Ah, Merlin screamed. He instinctively picked up the pepper spray and sprayed it wildly. Cough, cough. He had to admit the power of the anti-wolf spray. Even this deformed creature could not resist the pungent smell of the pepper spray. It was originally stuck to the ceiling, but it was sprayed to the ground by Melinda's anti-pervert spray. His mouth was constantly making strange noises, and his head was hitting everywhere. Merlin grabbed his high heels and used them to slap the deformed creature. Wow! The deformed creature let out a high-pitched cry. Merlin had actually used the heel of his high heels to pierce one of the deformed creature's eyes. At this moment, Merlin could not care about anything else. He turned around and ran. The deformed creature was extremely adaptable. It quickly adapted to the anti-wolf spray and chased after Merlin. Merlin was no longer wearing high heels. She had already realized that wearing high heels would only make her die faster. However, this high heel was her only weapon, and she was reluctant to throw it away. She grabbed it in her hand and ran. One of the deformed monster's eyes had been maimed by Merlin, and it was still foaming with blood. However, it seemed to be very unaccustomed to this state, causing its actions to be very abnormal. Its speed was obviously much faster than Merlin's, but it was like a drunkard. constantly hitting the walls on both sides of the corridor as it ran. This had also bought Merlin a lot of time, even though Merlin was old. Although Merlin was old, it was time to risk her life. Merlin had used all her physical strength to fight desperately. Those deformed creatures would not pity her age. Merlin ran wildly. At this moment, Merlin saw an open door. He rushed into the room and closed the door. Bang, bang. Outside the door came the sound of the monster hitting. Every hit was like hitting Merlin's heart. Fortunately, the door of this room was a completely stainless steel iron door, and its thickness was amazing. This door was like the anti-theft door of a vault. No matter how the deformed creature hit it, the iron door still stood. However, just from the sound of the impact, one could feel how strong the deformed creature was. Ordinary people could not fight against this kind of creature at all. At this time, the place that Merlin escaped into was the underground laboratory's computer room. This computer room was not small. In the center of the computer room was a large iron ball, with a diameter of 5 or 6 meters. Around the iron ball, many cables were connected. There were also many instruments around. This should be the power supply system of the entire underground laboratory. Merlin looked at the big iron ball, and then looked at the surrounding instruments. This seemed to be the alpha power supply system. Merlin recognized this huge set of energy supply instruments. She was not an expert in electrodynamics, but she had a high degree. Some things that she had not touched did not mean that she had not heard of them. As for the alpha power supply system, she had seen it in a university course 30 years ago. But at that time, it was still a concept, an extremely advanced power supply system. Today's power supply systems were wind, water, coal or nuclear power generation. The alpha power supply system was non-kinetic power generation, using chemical power generation. Through the fusion of several special chemical elements, it could produce a very large amount of electricity. However, this power supply system was later proved to have a big defect. Then it was listed as a dangerous design, and was permanently banned. Unexpectedly today he saw a complete alpha power supply system here. Even if Merlin was not an expert in this field, he knew that the cost of this alpha power supply system was even higher than the cost of the entire laboratory. Just as Merlin was admiring the masterpiece in front of him, he suddenly saw a few terrifying figures. A few deformed creatures. They were climbing along the cables to the ball, and then looked straight at Merlin. Merlin felt that her heart was about to stop beating. Her mind was empty. At this moment, she was exhausted and had no strength to resist. Moreover, even if she had the strength, she did not have the mind. Those deformed creatures jumped down from the metal ball, but they did not bite Merlin to death. One of the strongest deformed creatures opened its mouth and spat out a mouthful of saliva. The saliva fell on Merlin's body. Merlin immediately felt that his body was completely paralyzed. His body could not move at all. At this time, the deformed creature stretched out its tail and curled up Merlin, climbing toward the left side of the power supply room. Chapter 24:16. Not long after, the deformed creature that had wrapped Merlin with its tail stopped. Then, the deformed creature flicked its tail, and Merlin landed on the iron net. Merlin realized that these deformed creatures did not seem to intend to eat her, at least not for the time being. There were still many deformed creatures patrolling the surrounding passages. Merlin wanted to move her body, but she could only feel a little of her limbs. Moreover, the remaining saliva of the deformed creatures on her body was coagulating and gluing her to the iron net. Give up. Don't waste your energy. At this moment, a voice came from the side. Merlin turned her head and saw a man in a white coat. The man's eyes were lifeless, and his voice was very weak. You're a researcher here? It's obvious, isn't it? The man said weakly. Are these the results of your research? They can only be considered to have been cultivated by us. We can't research these things, the man said. When I came here, there were already their eggs. Later, through cultivation and reproduction, it reached the scale we have today. What are these things? Do you know the Quetzalcoatlus of the Inca civilization? I've heard of them. You mean they're Quetzalcoatlus, but they look like a bunch of baldies. There's not a single hair on their bodies. They don't look like Quetzalcoatlus at all. They're the original forms of Quetzalcoatlus, the man said. The man said, the origin of the first eggs in the lab was unknown, but through research, we found that they were highly intelligent and sociable. Therefore, the people who studied with me at the time believed that their civilization might have existed a long time ago. So what are they going to do to us now? Eat us? Or use us as food for winter? Merlin asked with a hint of self-mockery. She did not have much hope for survival research. At least, she did not see any hope of survival. Look up. Merlin turned her head and looked straight up. In the shadows of the ceiling that was covered with various pipes, there were wet meat eggs hanging. Merlin swallowed. She had already realized something. You've seen aliens, right? Even though Merlin's body was in a state of paralysis, she still felt unprecedented fear. The Quetzalcoatlus we see now are all cultivated in the laboratory's container trough, so their development is extremely incomplete. They can only be considered subspecies. The man said, after the real feathered serpent god emerges from the egg, it needs to drill into the body of a large mammal before it can grow into a real feathered serpent god. As for the process, you can refer to the facehugger in Alien. How did you know? I'm not the only one who was captured here. When the lab was evacuated, 4 people were captured by these subspecies. At this moment, a huge creature emerged from a circular passageway. Its size was similar to those subspecies, but it was much larger. In terms of weight alone, they were more than 5 times larger than normal subspecies. Unlike the subspecies that crawled on the ground, their upper bodies were propped up, just like humans. The lower half of its body wriggled forward like a snake. They had colorful feathers on their backs and armpits. This was obviously the Quetzalcoatlus that the researcher beside him was talking about. Ha! Quetzalcoatl let out a strange cry. The surrounding subspecies all lowered their heads, not daring to raise their heads. They were as humble as commoners in front of nobles. At this moment, the feathered serpent god moved into a water trough. Merlin heard the sound of an electric motor starting up. Then, the lights around the water trough lit up. The water trough where the feathered serpent god was connected to many cables, which seemed to be connected to electricity. In the water trough, it let out strange cries. What is it doing? Absorbing electricity, the researcher said. Quetzalcoatlus seems to be able to absorb electricity, and they have very high intelligence. No one has taught them how to use the equipment here. But in the past 2 days, I've watched them go from fumbling around to now being proficient in using it. You can't imagine how smart they are. Merlin felt that his scalp was about to explode. Of course, he understood the meaning of the researcher's words. Even humans would not dare to say that they could learn to operate such complicated electrical equipment without any relevant experience, let alone other species. If it was just physical strength, it would not be enough to threaten the entire human community. After all, there were many animals on Earth that were stronger than humans. But what if there was a species that was stronger and smarter than humans? What about their reproductive ability? The researcher glanced at Merlin from the corner of his eyes. As long as they have enough food, they only need 1 night to complete their mating, laying eggs, and hatching into larvae. After the larvae burrow into a mammal's body and eat the mammal's body, it takes a day for them to become semi-mature. Take that feathered serpent god for example. Its actual age is only 20 hours. Hearing the researcher's words, Merlin was beyond shocked. You people are crazy. How dare you research this kind of thing? It's too late to say that now. Besides, I'm just a researcher. In terms of work, I'm no different from an engineer. Even if I don't accept this job, someone else will. The researcher completely removed his responsibility. Although what he said was the truth, Merlin was so angry that she gritted her teeth. However, she had no way to teach the researcher a lesson at this moment. She could not even protect herself now. At that moment, a piece of flesh above them suddenly burst open. A huge amount of liquid poured down, drenching both of them. Of course, if it was just the liquid pouring down, it would not have made them panic. There was something else that came down with the liquid. It was a young feathered serpent god. This young feathered serpent god looked pink and a little cute. However, as long as it was associated with the facehugger, no one would think it cute anymore. The young feathered serpent god began to crawl toward the researcher. The researcher was so scared that he trembled all over and made a ho sound. The young feathered serpent god hesitated for a moment before turning around and crawling toward Merlin. Merlin was scared out of her wits. Only now did she understand how this researcher had managed to survive for the past 2 days to the last one. Merlin also wanted to make that sound, so she tried to make a ho sound. However, the young feathered serpent god did not stop. It had already crawled to Merlin's chest. Merlin could feel the chilly sensation when the young Quetzalcoatl god came into contact with her skin. Merlin was so scared that she was silent. Her breathing became rapid. Chapter 24:17. Death was approaching her bit by bit. Merlin could almost see the Grim Reaper waving at her. The young serpent god seemed to see it too. Suddenly Merlin woke up. How was this the Grim Reaper? It was Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao was standing before Merlin and waving at her. You! Merlin stared at Chen Zhao dumbfounded. Just then, the young serpent god jumped up and pounced at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao reached out and lifted the young serpent god's tail. Is this the serpent god? Chen Zhao looked at the researcher. Does it taste good? The young serpent god kept struggling in Chen Zhao's hand. It even turned around and bit Chen Zhao's hand. But it was so small. How could it bite Chen Zhao who had thick skin? Just then Merlin saw Lila Gavik come too. Standing beside Chen Zhao, Lila Gavich's eyes were still red and swollen. His eyes weren't big to begin with, but now there were only 2 slits left. Merlin, good job. Look at what you've done to me. Merlin opened her mouth, but didn't say anything. She really didn't understand why these two had the courage to stand before her. Couldn't they tell what was going on? Couldn't they see the surrounding subspecies and the huge adult serpent god? Lila Gavik snatched the young serpent god from Chen Zhao's hand. Apologize immediately, or I'll stuff this thing into your mouth. Before Merlin could apologize, Lila Gavik was bitten by the young serpent god. Lila Gavik's hand hurt. He tossed the young serpent god to the ground and stepped on it. The young serpent god was smashed to pieces. By then, the other subspecies and the huge adult serpent god had already noticed Chen Zhao and Lila Gavik's arrival. After noticing that Lila Gavik had killed one of their offspring, all the serpents were enraged. The mature feathered serpent god spread its arms, and the feathers on its body stood up. This was clearly a sign of their anger. Hee hee hee. The mature feathered serpent god let out a strange cry. The other subspecies immediately surrounded Chen Zhao and Lila Gavik. Merlin and the researcher had already sentenced Chen Zhao and Lila Gavik to death in their hearts. To them, Chen Zhao and Lila Gavik had no chance of survival at all. Just then, a subspecies charged toward Chen Zhao. He spat out a mouthful of saliva as soon as he opened his mouth. Merlin and the researcher counted in their hearts. 3, 2, 1 down, but Chen Zhao didn't fall. Chen Zhao looked at his wet body. It spat at me? Lila Gavik nodded. He'd seen Chen Zhao fight against millions of demons. But he had never seen a demon who dared to spit at him. He had to admit that the baldy in front of him was quite courageous. Fuck. Chen Zhao lifted his foot and kicked the subspecies away. The subspecies slammed into the concrete wall a dozen meters away. The concrete wall cracked, and the subspecies fell to the ground motionless. Merlin and the researcher were dumbfounded. What kind of strength was that? Not only was this man not afraid of the subspecies' paralyzing saliva, but he could even fight back and kick a subspecies to death. Just then the second subspecies pounced over. Careful! Merlin shouted with all his might. But just then, she saw Chen Zhao grab the subspecies' upper and lower jaws and pull hard. The subspecies' mouth was pried open. Seeing Chen Zhao twist it, it let go. The subspecies slid to the ground and didn't move. The researcher's heart was in turmoil. Others might not know, but he knew all the data of these subspecies. The strongest carnivorous creature on land was undoubtedly the Manchurian tiger. Siberian tigers could be over 3 meters long and weigh 400 kilograms. They had 80% muscle and 400 kilograms of bite force. They could run at 80 kilometers per hour and hit 800 kilograms with their forelimbs. Their stats were almost 2 to 3 times that of the best human boxers, weightlifters, and sprinters. They were also bodybuilders. But the subspecies stats surpassed the Siberian tiger in all aspects. They also had tails as powerful as anacondas. They could crush 1,500 kilograms. At the same time, they had intelligence close to humans. Chun Zhao actually tore open the upper and lower jaws of such a terrifying creature and killed it with a twist of his head. Just then, the mature feathered serpent god let out a strange cry and charged over. Seeing the body several times larger than the subspecies, Merlin and the researcher felt death waving at them. But just then, Chun Zhao blocked the attack with one hand. He grabbed the upper jaw of the mature Quetzalcoatl and swept it horizontally. The surrounding subspecies were all smashed into pieces. Chun Zhao threw it again. The mature feathered serpent god smashed into the concrete wall. Merlin and the researcher were dumbfounded. They couldn't say anything for a long time. That mature feathered serpent god weighed at least 1,500 kilograms, right? Chun Zhao smashed it away just like that? Huh, not dead? Such tenacious vitality. Chun Zhao was surprised. He'd thought his strength was enough. But he'd underestimated this guy. Just then, the mature feathered serpent climbed back up. It crouched low and hissed at Chun Zhao with its teeth bared. Immediately after, lightning surged on the body of the mature feathered serpent god. The researcher's eyes widened. It was his first time seeing this too. Chun Zhao looked left and right. He broke a golden pipe and held it in his hand. Then he strode toward the mature feathered serpent god. Before it could attack, Chun Zhao had already smashed it with his rod. The mature feathered serpent god died on the spot. Half of its head was smashed. Of course, the steel pipe in Chun Zhao's hand was deformed too. The researcher and Merlin were dumbfounded. The seemingly invincible feathered serpent god had been killed by Chun Zhao with a single strike? He hadn't even used his ultimate move. How could he be so shameless? He should at least give it a chance to use its ultimate move. This place is connected to all directions, Chun Zhao said. There are probably many that escaped. Bring the two of them with you. I'll go take a look. Lila Gavik knew Chun Zhao's style of doing things very well. She wasn't worried about Chun Zhao at all. This scene wasn't even a warm-up for Chun Zhao, divine king of the 9 heavens. Chapter 24:18. Lila Genovich poured an unknown potion into Merlin and the researcher's mouth. Merlin and the researcher felt the numbness in their bodies gradually recede. They could stand up again in a few minutes. Can you stand up now? Lila Genovich asked. Merlin tried and stood up. The researcher still felt powerless. I can't stand up. If you can't, then lie down and wait to be eaten. Lila Gavik said disapprovingly. I'm a billionaire. Do you still want me to carry you? As expected, the researcher stood up immediately. In times of life and death, all pretentiousness and weakness were not worth mentioning. Merlin followed Lila Genovich in silence. Lila Genovich cursed along the way. He vented all his resentment on Merlin. If I see you carrying a pepper spray with you again, I'll kick you out, Lila Gavich scolded. Boss, you didn't fire me? Merlin asked in surprise. With her experience, it was not difficult for her to find another high-paying job. However, she still had a dozen subordinates waiting for her to pay them. It was really hard to find a boss as generous as Lila Genovich. If possible, she did not want to lose her job. Fired. You haven't compensated me for my medical expenses and mental damage. Also, if I hear anything about me harassing you, you better be careful. Lila Genovich was also subtly warning Merlin about what he should and shouldn't say. Merlin was a smart person. He obviously knew that Lila Genovich was warning him to be careful. Merlin knew that what he had seen was not normal. Whether it was the underground lab or the terrifying power Chun Zhao had displayed earlier. Just as the three of them walked in front of the elevator, they heard a ding sound, and the elevator door opened. They saw Chun Zhao standing in the elevator, covered in blood. Merlin and the researcher were terrified. They stood there, not knowing what to do. Are you going to wait for the next one? Chun Zhao asked. Merlin and the researcher hurriedly entered the elevator. Lila Genovich was much calmer. He did not even find it strange. What was strange about it? What kind of scene was this? You killed them all? Lila Genovich asked. Yes. Chen Zhao didn't just walk around the entire underground lab. He also spread the dark lava out. Every nook and cranny was cleaned. He didn't even let go of the pipe connecting the toilet bowl. This thing was too big of a scourge. Not a single one was spared. If it was a regular demon, no matter how strong it was, Chen Zhao wouldn't have mobilized so many people. However, if the feathered serpent god wasn't careful, the entire human race would be overturned. Therefore, it was better to be cautious. After returning to the surface, the researcher wanted to borrow Chen Zhao and Lila Gavich's phone. Chen Zhao and Lila Gavich sneered at the researcher. "I still don't know your name." Chen Zhao put his hand on the researcher's shoulder. The researcher looked at Chen Zhao. "Sir, I don't think I need to Crack. Everyone heard the sound of Chen Zhao crushing the researcher's shoulder. When Chen Zhao let go of the researcher, he was already rolling on the ground, clutching his shoulder in pain. Chen Zhao squatted down and smiled at the researcher. "Maybe you don't know me, but I'd like to introduce myself. When someone goes against my will or rejects my request, I'll be very unhappy, very, very unhappy. And every time I get emotional, I'll kill people to calm myself down." Killing is illegal," the researcher said in pain. "I have an excellent team of lawyers. They can answer any of my legal questions, so I don't need you to explain to me." Merlin turned his head, indicating that he hadn't seen anything. Chen Zhao didn't say something. Killing might be illegal, but it wouldn't be if there was no evidence left. I'm Krabby Iyer. "Okay, Mr. Krabby. This is the beginning of our friendship." "Who the hell has a friendship with you?" Krabby Iyer thought to himself. "Do you know where the lab moved to?" Chen Zhao asked. "I don't know." Chen Zhao narrowed his eyes at Krabby Iyer. "Your answer made me like you even less." "I really don't know really," Krabby Iyer said hurriedly. He was afraid that Chen Zhao would attack him again. He hadn't eaten for 2 days, and his limbs were weak. If Chen Zhao hit him a few more times, he would probably lose his life. He didn't think that he could take a few punches from Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao had killed a mature feathered serpent god with one kick. Chen Zhao stared at Krabby Iyer again. Krabby Iyer repeatedly promised that he really didn't know. "Chen, I'll repurpose this land," Lila Gavich said. "It's best not to bury people around here, or else I'll be in trouble. 10 kilometers to the north. Even if I want to bury people, I'll bury them there." Krabby Iyer trembled in fear. "Don't kill me. To me, worthless people don't need to live." I got it. Krabby Iyer said hurriedly. "Got it? I don't know where the lab is, but I know the company that moved it to. It's Anti-Cargo," Krabby Iyer said hurriedly. Krabby Iyer hurriedly said. At that time, the person in charge of discussing the details of the move was in contact with someone from Anita Cargo Company, and I happened to know that person. We even talked for a while afterwards. So Anita Cargo Company definitely knows where to move the laboratory. Chen Zhao and Lila Gavich didn't expect to get such important information from Krabby Iyer. If they could find the lab directly, it would save them the trouble of spying on Homesia's family. "I hope you're not lying to me," Chen Zhao said calmly. No, I don't dare. But before we find it, you can't go anywhere." "You want to detain me? That's illegal detention." Chen Zhao glanced at Krabby Iyer. "Please don't repeat such stupid words in front of me." Krabby Iyer didn't speak. After all, Chen Zhao could even talk about murder so casually. Why would he care about illegal detention? "Gavich, we need to clean the place again. Find someone reliable." Chen Zhao meant that they should find people from the Dark Elves, not ordinary people. Chapter 24:19. Chen Zhao had already cleaned up the bottom, but there were still many unspeakable scenes. Krabby was a regular person. Chen Zhao didn't plan to bring him with him, but Lila Gavich had a solution. Before coming to the New Society Research Institute, Chen Zhao had already arranged for people to monitor Homesia's family. When he got home, Fei Lai was still reading the Huaxia classics. "Darling," Chen Zhao greeted them, and sat down beside Fei Lai. He took her right hand, and carefully removed the gauze. Fei Lai didn't respond. She just changed her posture, and hugged Chen Zhao. Fei Lai's wound had already healed, but there were still some marks. "How do you feel today?" "A little weak," Fei Lai answered. "I can't focus." This was the most obvious symptom of losing vitality. But Chen Zhao hadn't made a potion to replenish vitality yet. So he didn't have a good solution for now. Of course, Fei Lai's body and vitality were much stronger than regular people's. So Fei Lai could be considered healthy now. Her weakness was mostly because she wasn't used to it. Have you found the mastermind behind this incident? Not yet. Be faster, Fei Lai said gently. Angel Shore has already been sealed. I want to be faster too, but the mastermind is very cautious. The clues we can find are also very limited. Then work harder. You're protecting world peace. Fei Lai still felt that apart from being the president of the supernatural organization, Chen Zhao was also a member of a secret organization that protected world peace. Because that was what Chen Zhao had said at the beginning. Even now, she still firmly believed this. Chen Zhao would occasionally disappear for a day, and he never told her where he went. Papa! Papa! Just then little Jerlin ran in, followed by little Larissa who stumbled behind. Papa, look what I caught! Seeing what Jerlin was holding, Chen Zhao was scared out of his wits. Oh my! Chen Zhao quickly snatched the octopus from Jerlin. It was a mutant octopus. But when Chen Zhao grabbed it, he realized that it was already dead. Had the mutant octopus already spread to Mirror Lake? Frowning, Chen Zhao went to Mirror Lake. Dark magma was released instantly. Chen Zhao realized that there were only 2 or 3 mutated octopuses in Mirror Lake, and they were almost dead. This was probably because this was an upper-class water source, and it was fresh water. These octopuses were originally from the sea. No matter how much they mutated, it was impossible for them to survive in fresh water. Chen Zhao really thought that the octopuses had mutated to the point where they could leave the water. Chen Zhao had almost pissed his pants. Fortunately, it was just a false alarm. Just then Chen Zhao received Isaac's call. Mr. Chen, I've researched something about the mutated octopus. Any new discoveries? It's a bit complicated. Can you come over? The Marine Biology Research Institute? No, my house. Chen Zhao was surprised, but he didn't ask. When they found Isaac's house, they found that it was just an ordinary 2-story house. It covered an area of less than 150 square meters. For the people of the United States, this was quite small. Moreover, more than half of it was made up of courtyards and turf. The real construction area was less than 100 square meters. Ding dong! The one who opened the door was a beautiful young woman. She first glanced at the car parked outside the fence, and then at Chen Zhao's clothes. Hi, what's up? Chen Zhao was a bit wary of the woman. Perhaps it was because the security in their community was not very good. Thus, when she opened the door, she only left a small gap. Hi, madam. I'm here to see Isaac. Hi. You and Isaac are? I think I'm his new boss, Chen Zhao said, smiling. Oh, Isaac's in the garage. No, in the lab. Okay, thank you. May I know who you and Isaac are? I'm Isaac's wife, Salina. Chen Zhao could feel that Salina and Isaac were the same type of person. After learning his identity, Salina's attitude clearly changed. Of course, Chen Zhao didn't dislike people like her. Everyone pursued profit. It wasn't a big deal. Actually, Salina and Isaac had similar personalities. They both wanted to live a glamorous life. Salina had married Isaac in the first place. It was mostly because Salina felt that Isaac's future was predictable. However, Isaac's career didn't rise as Salina had expected. For several years, there had been no waves, neither rising nor falling. Isaac's income was also far from enough for the family to do whatever they wanted. This caused the couple's relationship to weaken day by day. Salina definitely didn't want a life where she had to worry about daily necessities. She wanted to be able to go to all kinds of high-end clubs and choose the luxuries she liked. She didn't want to drool at those things in commercials. She didn't want to fool people with fakes and get recognized at parties. Because of this, Salina even thought about divorce. But 2 days ago, Salina saw Isaac come back in the middle of the night. She wanted to have a big fight with him. But Itzhak told her that he had a new job, and that his new boss was a very generous man. Salina didn't really believe it. She felt that even if Isaac changed jobs and got a higher salary, it would still be hard for him to reach her expectations. But when she saw Chen Zhao's car today, her expectations were slightly raised. She didn't own his sports car, But at least she knew that the car was expensive. It might be something that the couple couldn't reach, even if they worked hard for a lifetime. Selina brought Chen Zhao to the lab. Chen Zhao saw the sliding door. It was clearly a garage for both parking and experiments. Itzhak, your boss is here to see you. Isaac turned around and saw Chen Zhao standing outside. Mr. Chen, you're here. Chen Zhao looked around and said in disappointment, I need a professional researcher, not an amateur. I need a professional researcher, not an amateur. In this kind of environment, it would be very difficult for a researcher to publish a paper, even if it was the most accurate data, to achieve results, or to gain attention. Hearing Chen Zhao's words, Isaac's heart started pounding. How much do you need to invest to build a research institute, like the Marine Biology Research Institute? Chapter 2420. Selina saw Chen Zhao write down the number that Isaac had given her on the check without hesitation. She was immediately sure that Isaac's new boss was indeed generous with his money. Very generous. He was so extravagant that she wanted to devote herself to him. Not to mention Selina. Even Itzhak wanted to devote himself to her. Of course, even without any contract, Isaac wouldn't dare to stuff the money into his own pocket. Even without using Chen Zhao's own power, Chen Zhao's legal team alone was enough to make Isaac spend the rest of his life picking soap in prison. Mr. Chen, boss, which direction do you need me to research? Isaac wasn't a pure researcher. He knew that Chen Zhao didn't need to benefit the world, but to turn their research results into returns. Build a team for me in the early stages. I don't need you guys to research anything valuable, but you have to speak up for me when I need it. Itzhak roughly understood what Chen Zhao meant. What Chen Zhao needed was someone who could speak up for him in his field of expertise. He could make no contributions, but he couldn't make mistakes. Of course, it would be best if he could create value for Chen Zhao. Selina, can you help me prepare dinner for boss and me? Isaac looked at his wife. Of course, Selina said considerately. My pleasure. After Selina left, Chen Zhao asked, how long will it take to build your team? It depends on what kind of research team you need. If it's someone like my teacher Nancy, it'll probably take at least a year. I don't need someone like Nancy. I need someone you can completely control. Of course, I also need someone I can control, someone with professional abilities and ideals. If that's the case, it shouldn't be hard. 1 month is enough. Okay, I'll give you 1 month. Also, do you need any professional equipment? 1 scientific research ship and 1 deep-sea submarine. These 2 are the most important, and also the most expensive. Boss, I'm afraid the money you gave me. How much? Research ships and deep-sea submarines also have different prices. The best. Also, it's best if it's available on the market. I don't want to have to order scientific research ships and deep-sea submarines. Chen Zhao was an impatient person. What he needed was someone who could endorse him, not a team with scientific spirit. I think it should be within $30 million. When you have time, go and take a look at these manufacturers and give me a quote. I will send someone to buy them. He didn't have to buy the equipment himself. After all, the price was too high. Even if he was confident that Isaac would not dare to be greedy. But if Isaac was really hot-headed, it would be troublesome to clean up. Chen Zhao could casually give him a huge check. Although it was a lot of money, it was not enough for Isaac to give up everything for it. But when money reached a certain level, that might not be the case. Tell me about your recent research on mutated octopuses. What did you find? Boss, I've dissected more than a dozen mutated octopuses. I've discovered that these mutated octopuses only have a lifespan of about 15 days. Many of their organs haven't fully grown, but their bodies have already matured. This causes many of their functions to be uncoordinated, which is why their lifespan is very short. Their entire lives are spent eating and dying. All kinds of research have shown that this isn't a mature mutated specimen. It's more like it was created for some purpose. To cause trouble, Chen Zhao said. Yes, that's right. It was created to cause trouble, Isaac said. There are a few main types of marine biology research. One is to obtain medical enlightenment or discovery through studying marine organisms. Another is to obtain data on breeding and breeding to create economic benefits. Another is to record the habits, evolution, and evolutionary history of marine organisms. Of course, there are also some research with the intention of protecting the environment. But generally, these are the main purposes of marine biology research. This mutated octopus is definitely man-made. Secondly, I can't think of any other use for this mutated octopus other than causing trouble. This mutated octopus has a short life cycle and abnormal brain development. Its intelligence is much lower than that of normal octopuses. They rely more on instinct to eat and hunt. When they're larvae, they'll attach themselves to medium and large fish and eat the parasites or plankton on them. Then when they're bigger, they'll eat the host's body to obtain enough nutrients for growth. A 1 kilogram fish is probably enough for their short life, but they'll leave the host after their outer body matures. Then, they'll start looking for more suitable food. Isaac paused and said, I threw a few mice into the tank where the mutant octopuses were kept. At the same time, I also threw in some small fish. Except for one octopus that was easily bitten to death by the mice. Most of the mutant octopuses chose mice as their first target. They seemed to have a special liking for mammals. This made me suspect that the original purpose of the person who designed and created them was to attack humans. Also, I discovered a special characteristic of these mutated octopuses. What characteristic? Backtrack. What's backtrack? Do you know about salmon? They'll pass through many obstacles and return to their birthplace to lay eggs. Then they'll return to the sea to grow. This cycle repeats itself. These octopuses seem to have this characteristic too. I discovered it by accident. After one escaped from the tank, it kept crawling in one direction in a straight line. When I discovered this mutated octopus, I suddenly had this idea. Then, I experimented with other mutated octopuses and discovered that some of them have the ability to backtrack. Some, so not all. Actually, not all of them. It mainly depends on whether they've eaten completely. According to my calculations, after they killed 5 mice and gnawed on part of their bodies, they're almost done eating. After that, they'll try everything they can to escape from the water tank and head in one direction. Chapter 24-21. Isaac's research was quite thorough. However, there was one thing he hadn't figured out, which Chen Zhao knew. The mutated octopuses weren't eating normal food. They were sucking life force. Are there any dead rats? Chen Zhao asked. Yes. Although Isaac's temporary lab wasn't big, it had a lot of equipment. But because the area was small, many things were very messy. Once he stopped, some equipment had to be moved again. Of course, this wasn't because Isaac had a scientific spirit. He was just trying to prove his own value. Chen Zhao never disliked people like him. In fact, he quite admired him. After all, things that were biased towards interests could change. However, people like Isaac who thought that he was trying to prove his value wouldn't change. Perhaps he was powerful and greedy, but that didn't mean he was a bad person. At least up until now, Isaac hadn't used his knowledge to harm others. As long as Chen Zhao had a question, Isaac would answer it. At least in his field of expertise, he could give Chen Zhao almost all answers. Oh, if they attach themselves to a large mammal such as a whale, is it possible for an ant to shake an elephant? Impossible, Isaac said, chuckling. Every creature has a growth limit. Even if they have the ability, they can't penetrate the whale's skin. The whale's skin is very thick. Even small bullets can't penetrate it, let alone octopuses. Also, these mutated octopuses are very weak. Before they finish eating, they rely on the ocean currents to get close to the LA coastline. Even if they attach themselves to whales, they won't be able to attach themselves for long with whales' speed. They'll be shaken off at any time. Based on these points, we can rule out this possibility. A while later, Salina came into the lab. Isaac, Mr. Chen, I prepared some food. Let's go and eat together. Chen Zhao didn't decline. Salina prepared some barbecue and beer. However, because Chen Zhao had to drive, he only ordered a few cans of drinks. Boss, have you thought about aquaculture? Never. What's the profit from aquaculture? Chen Zhao asked. It depends on the scale, the type of aquaculture, And the sales channel. Give me an accurate figure. If I buy a 20 square kilometer sea area for aquaculture, how much profit can I make in a year? If it's a mollusk bivalve, it can probably exceed $20 million a year. If it's other fish, because of the huge difference in type and price, the income is also different. Also, due to the impact of the ocean climate change, the data changes are also very big. Hearing the 20 million profit, Chen Zhao lost interest. Not to mention the complexity of mariculture. Mariculture and tourism were essentially in conflict. Chen Zhao couldn't set up a farm near Nanqi Island either. Chen Zhao planned to build a complete resort on Nanqi Island and the surrounding waters. They took over almost all the entertainment programs. In Isaac and Salina's opinion, an annual profit of tens of millions of dollars should be considered high. He wanted to show his value, which was why he wanted to encourage Chen Zhao. How does an employee demonstrate his value? Of course, it was to help the boss earn money. However, Chen Zhao didn't care about the profits at all. On the way home, he received a call from Andrews. Hello, Mr. Chen. Hello, Andrews. How have you been? Thank you for your concern. I'm great. Andrews was indeed great. After all, as Chen Zhao's business manager, he was responsible for helping Chen Zhao with some investments. Plus, Chen Zhao had a terrifying amount of cash, so he had a very high status in the banking department. Of course, he would get a commission for every cent he helped Chen Zhao earn. Chen Zhao only wanted one thing from him: short-term, stable and safe. He didn't need to rely on the cash to make money. It was fine as long as he didn't lose money. He didn't earn much for Chen Zhao. It was basically the same as the depreciation of the currency. However, Chen Zhao still gave him a 5% share. Andrews actually had a risk-taking gene in his bones. After all, almost everyone in the financial industry would take risks. However, he really didn't dare to go against Chen Zhao's wishes. This was because every investment he made required Chen Zhao's approval first. If he dared to invest in some high-risk projects, Chen Zhao would directly cancel his financial services. Many people in the business department had their eyes on Chen Zhao's big cake. Some people even used other methods to get Chen Zhao's phone number, saying that they could give Chen Zhao more benefits. In the end, Chen Zhao was annoyed by the harassment and went to complain to Andrews. Only then did Andrews know about it. However, Andrews was quite satisfied with his current income. He helped Chen Zhao manage the billions of dollars in cash, even though they were all ordinary projects. However, because of the huge amount of cash, he could easily pull the profits of the projects and bring a greater return to the money. Ever since he became Chen Zhao's financial manager, he had helped Chen Zhao earn at least $50 million. He also received a share of more than $2 million. In the past, he would help other clients with financial investments. Although the return was higher, other clients couldn't compare to Chen Zhao. A few $100,000, or even $1 million was already a big client. Even if the return was 10%, the share he could get was pitifully small. There was also a ladder share. He wasn't like Chen Zhao, who would give him a 5% share no matter how much money he made. Thus, until now, he hadn't made an investment that caused Chen Zhao to lose money. As for the other people in the business department, they had dozens or even hundreds of clients. Even if they made high-risk investments, they might not make as much as him. Moreover, it was much easier, because he only had to take care of Chen Zhao. Thus, he would always visit Chen Zhao first during the holidays. Also, Andrews knew when to stop. Every time he called or visited Chen Zhao, it was always at the right time. He wouldn't let Chen Zhao feel like his life was interrupted. Mr. Chen, Miss Amira said that she wants to meet you. When are you free? I might be busy these days, Chen Zhao said. If possible, it'd be the weekend. Never mind, I'll contact Amira later. Chapter 24-22. Because the mutant octopus incident hadn't been resolved. Chen Zhao was so busy that he couldn't care less. He couldn't help it. This was really troublesome. And the influence was only on the surface. Even if Chen Zhao wasn't the president of the supernatural organization, he would still be affected. No matter how he looked at it, it was a supernatural incident. And if it was caused by someone from the supernatural world, it wouldn't just affect a single person. It might affect all the spiritualists in the area. For example, if a wolf bit a person to death, with the way the human government dealt with it, it was very likely that all the wolves in the area would be killed. The supernatural world wouldn't use such drastic measures. But there would definitely be influence. Just like the saying went, if the sky collapsed, the tall one would hold it up. Right now Chen Zhao was that tall one. So Chen Zhao could only postpone Amira's invitation. In a community in Los Angeles. Homesius, our house seems to be under surveillance. Adele dialed her husband's phone number. She knew what her husband's occupation was. She didn't care what her husband did. What she cared about was the safety of her family. And she was a retired female soldier. She couldn't say that she was very elite. But at least she knew some investigative and anti-investigative methods. She also realized that the people watching her were very unprofessional. They couldn't even compare to ordinary police. The people watching her house were a man and a woman, both very young. And their car was parked across the road from her house. They didn't even roll up the windows. Usually, police surveillance would be done in vans or SUVs with a certain amount of space. Also, they wouldn't park their car across the road from the surveillance house. They wouldn't get out of the car either. Even if they needed to eat or go to the toilet, they would drive away with the car. But the man and woman watching her house weren't like this. They were monitoring him so blatantly. During lunch and dinner, they would get out of the car to buy things, and then return to the car casually. Adele felt like her intelligence was insulted. Sometimes, when she went out to the supermarket to buy things, the young couple would blatantly follow her in their car. It only took Adele a day to determine the two young men in the car outside. Police? Homesius asked. Not police, Adele answered. Adele replied, I can't tell where they came from. They have no experience in surveillance at all. And they don't look like police officers. They look more like two big kids. This time, Wes had sent Belia and Morid to monitor them. The two of them really had no experience in surveillance. In fact, Wes wanted to send the Lightning team. In the entire supernatural organization, other than Gaia who had military experience, the most professional was the Lightning squad led by Cows. However, Klaus and the others had been out of the country during this period of time, and distant water could not put out a nearby fire. Gaia was even less suited for surveillance, because Gaia was too eye-catching. First of all, she had appeared in one of Steven's movies. Although she wasn't very popular, she still had a certain level of fame. Coupled with her eye-catching figure, it was hard not to be recognized. In the end, Wes could only send two relatively inconspicuous members to monitor them. They were Belia and Morid. Morid used to be a delinquent, and had the air of a ruffian. Belia also changed her clothes slightly, and put on smoky makeup. Standing beside Morid, they looked like a pair of punk-style delinquents. Morid, I'm thirsty. Go buy a few drinks. Most supervisors prepared their own rations, and tried to drink as little water as possible. That way, they could continue monitoring for a longer period of time. However, they didn't care that much. They didn't know these things at all. When they were hungry, they would get out to buy food. When they were thirsty, they would get out to buy drinks. Then they would go to the toilet frequently. Even during surveillance, one would lean against the window and stare at the opposite house, while the other would sit in the driver's seat and play with his phone. After a while, another person would continue monitoring. If Klaus and the others knew that Belia and Morid were monitoring them like this, they would probably take a submachine gun and shoot them. Morid returned with the drinks. Belia glanced at the drinks. I don't like these. It's good enough that you have drinks. We're monitoring them now. At that moment, Belia saw the door of the house opposite open, and Adele walked out. Quick, get in the car. That woman is going out. Adele, who was driving, looked at the car behind her and felt a surge of anger. She didn't know who had sent these two to monitor her, but she felt that they were insulting her. Even if they were monitoring her, they should have at least sent two smart and skilled people. Sending two kids who couldn't even be considered amateurs to monitor her? What was going on? Adele wondered if she should lead them to some desolate place and bury them. But on second thought, that wasn't right. If she buried them now, it would be hard to deal with them, if they sent two smart people over. Adele suppressed her plan to kill them and destroy their corpses. The first thing to do now was to figure out the power behind these two. She wanted to see what their goal was. Gradually, a plan formed in Adele's mind. At the same time, Adele sped up. The car behind her sped up as well. They followed behind without any intention of hiding. "Quick," Moritz said confidently. "Did she notice us?" "Impossible," Moritz said confidently. "Do you think this is a movie? She's just an ordinary woman. Even if we stand before her, she won't know what we're doing." Suddenly, Adele's car turned the steering wheel to the left. Oh no! Moritz didn't realize that when Adele turned the steering wheel, there was another car in front of them. It was too late for them to turn or step on the steering wheel. Bang! They were rear-ended. Moritz and Belia were both hit by the airbag, bleeding profusely. They could only hear noises and the siren of the ambulance. "Are you Chen Zhao?" "I am. Who are you?" "Our hospital has received 2 injured people from a car accident. They gave you your contact number. They haven't paid for the treatment and hospitalization yet. Can you come over?" "Sure. Which hospital are you from?" "I'll go over now." Chen Zhao was confused. Who was in a car accident? She even gave him her contact number. Despite his confusion, Chen Zhao still rushed to the hospital. Chapter 24-23. Sorry. Chen Zhao looked at the woman he'd accidentally knocked over. He reached out like a gentleman and helped her up. "I should be the one sorry," Adele said, smiling. Chen Zhao nodded at her. He didn't care about who was right or wrong. Everyone came to the hospital because they were sick or their family or friends were sick. Everyone's time was precious. Therefore, he didn't have the time to argue over a small accident here. Chen Zhao walked around Adele and pushed open the door of the ward. Adele looked back at Chen Zhao, who'd just entered the room, and then left expressionlessly. Chen Zhao didn't notice Adele's gaze. He was more concerned about Moritz and Belia's injuries. Thankfully, when he entered the room, he saw that the two were fine. Moritz's head was wrapped in gauze, and there were bruises around his eyes. Belia was slightly better. One of her hands was in a cast and hung on a frame. She couldn't get out of bed yet. "President," Belia called out in surprise when she saw Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao looked at the two in annoyance. "What's wrong with you two? How did you get into an accident?" "President, West arranged for us to monitor that woman called Adele. We drove a bit faster, so there was an accident," Moritz said, feeling wronged. "You were driving very fast." "Not very fast. We can drive as fast as we can in the city, around 40 kilometers per hour. Fortunately, they'd been driving in the city. Even now, they still didn't understand that they'd been tricked by Adele. No matter how fast they drove in the city, they couldn't go very fast. If they'd been on a suburban road or a highway, perhaps Chen Zhao would see them in the morgue now. "Why did you give the hospital my contact number? Can't you contact West?" "Because it's embarrassing," Moritz said shyly. Yes, it was embarrassing. Too embarrassing. Because West hadn't given them the surveillance mission. They'd fought for it. They'd watched too many secret agent movies, and suddenly wanted to be a secret agent. At the time, West thought that it didn't matter who the mission was. He didn't think too much, and just gave it to them. West didn't know that Moritz and Belia had messed up the mission. Moritz and Belia were also confused, so they didn't tell Chen Zhao in detail. As a result, Chen Zhao was confused and thought that it was really a normal traffic accident. President, there's one more thing. Moritz looked at Chen Zhao awkwardly. Belia also lowered her head and stole a glance at Moritz. What is it? Say it. Can this car accident be considered a work injury? I've already paid for your medical fees, so you don't have to count it as a work injury. Plus, your salaries aren't low either, right? A few $1,000s is nothing to you too. He wasn't going to argue with them over a few $1,000s. Belia and Moritz were the original members of the supernatural organization. They were also Chen Zhao's first supporters. Plus, their strength and teamwork meant a lot to Chen Zhao. Therefore, they were treated very well. A basic salary of $60,000 per month, plus some allowances and benefits. Even if they were thrown into Wall Street, they would still be considered high-income people. If it's not medical fees, what about the compensation for the car accident? You're mainly responsible for this accident? The police came and issued an accident liability certificate. We are fully responsible. Okay, Chen Zhao said. Do you have their contact? I'll take care of the compensation. He's injured too. He's in this hospital now. Is he badly injured? No, Moritz said hurriedly. At the same time, he took out a business card and handed it to Chen Zhao. This is their lawyer's business card. Got it. Chen Zhao took the card and left the ward. Hello, are you Ms. Queely's lawyer, Terrence? Yes. Who's this? 2 of my employees hit Ms. Queely's car on the road today. I'd like to discuss compensation with you, or Ms. Queely. Sure, you can choose a place. From the voice on the phone, Chen Zhao could feel that the other person wasn't very friendly. Of course, it wasn't incomprehensible. After all, Mort and Belia had hit the other person. How could he expect the other person to be nice? I heard from my staff that Miss Quilly is in the same hospital as them. As their boss, I have the obligation to visit Miss Quilly. I wonder if I can apologize to Miss Quilly in person? Sure, 15th floor, room 1501. After deciding on the time and place, Chen Zhao went to a flower shop near the hospital and bought a bouquet of tulips. Chen Zhao knocked on the door of room 1501. Come in. Chen Zhao pushed the door open and saw that the environment was much better than Mort and Belia's. It was also a single room. There were 2 women in the room. One of them was sitting on the bed with her head wrapped in gauze. Hello, I'm Chen Zhao, the boss of the person who hit Miss Queely. Chen Zhao looked at the woman on the bed. You must be Miss Queely. This is for you. Thank you. Queely nodded. Terrence took the bouquet and placed it in a vase. She turned around and stared at Chen Zhao aggressively. Mr. Chen, I'm Miss Queely's lawyer, Terrence said. I want to know your opinion on this matter. Her tone sounded like she was interrogating Chen Zhao. Of course, Chen Zhao replied with a smile. As the one at fault, I'll compensate Miss Queely for her car repair, medical and lost time. Of course, I'll also cover any expenses incurred in the process, such as lawyer fees. He didn't plan on rejecting any reasonable compensation, but he was rather displeased with Terrence's attitude. It was an accident. She didn't hurt Queely on purpose. Moreover, he'd come to discuss compensation himself. But Tyron continued to be overbearing. Are you sure you want to pay for your employees' compensation? Is there a problem? Chen Zhao glanced at Terrence, his eyes filled with disdain. This is the bill, Mr. Chen. Are you sure you want to pay for your employees' compensation? Terrence tossed a bill to Chen Zhao. When Chen Zhao saw the number on the bill, he felt a headache coming on. No wonder those 2 were looking for him. Because they crashed a sports car. The repair cost was $1. 35 million. Together with the miscellaneous expenses, it added up to nearly $1.8 million. Chen Zhao took out his checkbook, wrote down 2 million and signed it. This should be enough. Seeing the number, Terrence was slightly surprised. Then she said, I also want acrophobic drivers to drive dangerously. Chen Zhao frowned and looked at the 2 women. Miss Queely, is this what you want too? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.